Chapter 399. Idiot, something big is going to happen. What? Huaishi's head was filled with question marks. He had no idea what was going on. Wasn't everything fine just now? It was fine, but that doesn't mean that something big is going to happen. Crow stared at him with wide eyes. Are you still dreaming that you'll be able to go home safely? Who the hell told me that this was a tour bus? Huaishi stared at her with grief and indignation. Where's the door? I want to get off. You want to get off? Don't worry, there's an express train leaving the island in 3 hours. You can still make it if you buy a ticket now. As long as you're fast, you'll be able to escape. Huaishi's eyes widened. He didn't understand why she didn't push him into a fire pit this time. Crow paused for a moment and revealed a curious expression. But, are you really going to ignore the reaction of the Book of Destiny? Huaishi stuttered for a long time, but he couldn't bring himself to say, I'm really going to ignore it. Moreover, he had already smelled something really fragrant. Could it be that there really is a fragment of heaven here? Crow nodded. Most likely. To be honest, I still don't understand what's going on. Huaishi clasped his hands together. Can a beautiful big sister explain it to me? Crow smiled. You've asked the right person. Huaishi's mouth twitched. To be honest, I thought you would be modest. Don't big sisters look good? Crow tilted her head and glanced at him. Her casual tone caused Huaishi's premonition of death to faintly awaken. Yes. Huaishi nodded so frequently that his brain was about to explode. Follow your heart. That's how honest you are. That's right. Hurry up and walk. Crow landed on his shoulder. While there's still time, let's hurry up and buy some things. Why are you in such a hurry? I don't mind if you're a bit late, but things might change if you're late, you understand? Okay. I understand. Huaishi quickened his pace. His sense of urgency as a tool finally came online. Before he left, Huaishi had to go to the lounge of the Giant Goose Chamber of Commerce to find Yuan Mu, who had been waiting for him for 2 hours. After hesitating for a long time, he put his hands together and apologized. I'm sorry, something urgent came up. I have to go. Yuan Zhao, who was scrolling through his phone to decide where to go next, was stunned for a long time. Soon after, he became suspicious. I heard that there are a lot of young ladies standing under pink lights in the basement too. You're not thinking of sending me away to do some dirty adult things, are you? What the hell is wrong with your brain? Huaishi couldn't spit out a mouthful of blood. He glared at him. Am I that kind of person? Yuan Zhao scrutinized him for a long time, half believing and half doubting. That's right, after all, you don't look like the kind of person who would pay. Then which group do I belong to? Do I take money? Little brother, don't you think you've misunderstood me a bit too much? In any case, I'm very sorry that I'm going to have to stand you up this afternoon. Huaishi apologized sincerely. How about tomorrow or the day after? If not, I'll take care of you when you come to Xian High. After seeing that Huaishi's sincerity and apology were genuine, Yuan Zhao did not get angry. He waved his hand graciously. If you're busy, go ahead. But I have to remind you, I don't have free time every day. Thank you. Huaishi patted his shoulder gratefully and turned to leave. But when he reached the door, his hand that was on the doorknob paused. Suddenly, he was reminded of a question. Was it really a coincidence that he had such a sudden reunion with Yuan Zhao? Or did someone have other plans? After sensing the impending storm, Huaishi also started to get nervous. He turned back to ask, speaking of which, why are you guys here? Yuan Zhao said, didn't I tell you, my cousin is going to graduate, so we're here to celebrate. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, who suggested and made the decision for you to come here. Huaishi said seriously. This matter is very important. Yuan Zhao scratched his head for a long time and said with uncertainty, I think it was that bootlicker Feng Chu who suggested it. Huai Shi thought back to the young man who stood quietly beside Yuan Yuan during the day. He always had a warm smile on his face, and stood beside Yuan Yuan enthusiastically, but he always maintained a distance that was not annoying. He did not seem to be estranged or repulsed by Huai Shi. He could even be called a gentleman. It was him? Huai Shi frowned. But at the time, my cousin didn't seem very interested. Yuan Zhao said with emotion, but it's no wonder that she suddenly agreed the next day. Hey, don't be fooled by her cold appearance. In fact, she's very cooped up at home. If there's nothing important, she will never go out. This time, she actually took the initiative to go on a trip, which gave me a shock. Huai Shi didn't say anything. What's wrong? Yuan Zhao asked. No, nothing. Huai Shi shook his head. He couldn't conclude anything based on this, but it was inevitable that a shadow would rise in his heart. If Yuan Zhao's arrival was related to what was going to happen next, what should he do then? The sense of urgency grew stronger. Take care of yourself. Huai Shi finally turned back and cautiously reminded him, be careful to stay in a place with a mobile phone signal. If you encounter anything, don't resist. If there's an accident, quickly call Big Cousin for help, understand? Yuan Zhao didn't understand. But Huai Shi had already left quickly. Time and tide wait for no man. By the time Yuan Zhao returned to the hotel that night, it was already 10 o'clock. There was nothing he could do about it. The universe star was just too fun. How could a 14-year-old who had been cooped up at home for 2 months endure this? He had just participated in an offline competition organized by the Border Entertainment Association, and it was already 10:40. Yuan Zhao carried bags of prizes and a few movable origin substance models that he had always wanted but never had the money to buy. He hummed and danced as he walked into his room, put down the things, and turned on the lights. Then, he sucked in a breath of cold air. He saw the slender figure sitting in the living room drinking tea. Yuan Yuan. Sis, Yuan Zhao's legs trembled as he squeezed out an awkward smile. You haven't slept yet? Yuan Yuan lowered her head to look at the watch on her wrist, then raised her head to look at her younger cousin. She suddenly asked, why did you come back so late? You didn't forget about the curfew, did you? Ahaha, it's all Huai Shi's fault for being too enthusiastic. Yuan Zhao scratched his head and looked around. He insisted on dragging me along to eat and drink. I couldn't even chase him away. Is that so? The silent young girl nodded her head in understanding and asked, did you have fun? Yes, yes. Yuan Zhao nodded his head crazily and smiled fawningly. I promise it'll be just this once today. Sis, don't tell my mom. I promise I won't. Then, did he say anything special to you? Yuan Yuan interrupted him and suddenly asked, did he ask you any questions? In the silence, the young girl sitting in the shadows raised her head. A trace of caution and seriousness appeared on her delicate face. Especially the part about me. No. Yuan Zhao subconsciously shook his head. That guy was eating and drinking the entire way. His mouth didn't even rest. He didn't ask anything. Is that so? A trace of suspicion appeared in Yuan Yuan's eyes. After muttering to herself for a long time, she shook her head. Have you finished the things I told you to do? It was only now that Yuan Zhao saw the unread messages from Yuan Yuan on his phone. There were 6 messages in a row, but he didn't see a single one. When he opened the messages, his eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at his cousin in front of him. In the silence, only a crisp sound could be heard. Behind Yuan Zhao, the expressionless old servant quietly closed the door. What followed was a deathly silence that made people feel uneasy. At the same time, in the music hall's lounge, Huai Shi was counting his gains from the afternoon. 1 stainless elder, half an ounce of ghost spider silk, 2 ounces of green tapir's tail hair, and vermilion bird's tail feather. These things were all placed on the table in front of him. After throwing away the box, it didn't even add up to £1. Other than the spider silk, they were all relatively common alchemy materials. In the end, because of the lack of time, Huai Shi was ruthlessly slaughtered several times. Even if it was just a memory, he could feel his heart twitching. Although his heart ached, his hands didn't stop moving. According to Crow's instructions, he first took a bath, then put on a pair of gloves. He used alchemy fire to evenly heat the stainless elder so that its internal structure would change in the alchemy fire and bend into a ring shape. The most important thing was that the internal structure had to be connected head to tail, forming a perfect closed loop. The advantage of the stainless elder was that its internal crystal lattice structure was very uniform. As long as the cross-section was cut well, it was easy to handle. Next, the spider silk was woven into a thread. 4 strands of 2 ounces of spider silk were twisted together to create a thread that was about 10 meters long. Moreover, the spider silk thread itself was transparent and almost weightless in the hand. This part was a bit time-consuming, but it wasn't difficult. It could be done with a bit of concentration. Next, he used the spider silk to connect the materials together and wrap them around the ring-shaped elder. He also had to weave a complicated pattern inside. Finally, he had to decorate the bottom of the ring-shaped elder with a few pale tail feathers. Huai Shi held the thread at the top and lifted it up, carefully examining it. "This is a dream catcher?" "That's right." Crow nodded. "To be precise, it's an entrance to a dream. Generally speaking, it's a tool used to infiltrate other people's dreams." "You want me to infiltrate other people's dreams?" "No, to be precise, I don't want you to infiltrate a person's dream." Crow deliberately emphasized the word person. "What you want to infiltrate is the dream of this Stellaris." Chapter 400. Huai Shi was dumbfounded. The astral? Trains can dream too? If it were a normal train, it wouldn't. But do you think that a normal train could travel on the endless sea as if it were walking on flat ground, and on such a large scale? Crow said, "Under certain circumstances, a person's dreams will be close to or even overlap with each other, just like soap bubbles flying in the air. If there is something in the area that emits a strong gravitational force, everyone will even enter a common dream. In the end, dreams are just illusions created by the activity of origin substances during sleep. As long as there are enough containers, you can store as many dreams as you want. To put it bluntly, you can plug into a server and turn it into an online game, right? I've discovered that you have a special ability to comprehend things in some strange places." "You flatter me," Huai Shi smiled reservedly. "But right now the connection isn't that close. At most, we can sense each other." Crow sighed softly. "After all, the astral has been asleep for so many years. After its consciousness has dissipated, even the dreams will become fleeting and thin. The old Orises has fallen to this extent. It's really sad." "What's that?" Huai Shi seemed to have heard something incredible. "Orises something? Yes, it's Orises." Crow tilted her head and looked at him in confusion. "HM? Didn't I tell you before?" Huai Shi smiled and grabbed her by the neck. He took out the Book of Destiny. "How about this? Let's look back at the past record. If you did tell me, I'll give you all the money. If you didn't, I'll break your neck. How about that?" "Hey, young man, calm down." Crow flapped her wings and struggled. "Why are you treating a beautiful big sister like this? Don't be angry. I'll give you benefits. I'll give you benefits, okay? I don't care. Thank you." Huai Shi stared at her with his eyes wide open. "Can you please explain to me what's going on with Orises?" "Well, it's a long story. Don't rush, I'll keep it short." Crow, who knew that he was in the wrong, looked around and said, "I wasn't sure at first. After all, it has been sleeping for a long time, and it looks completely different from before. It wasn't until the Book of Destiny reacted that I was able to confirm it. So, What exactly is Orus's? Huaishe crossed his arms and looked at her. Thinking with his heel, he knew that the person who was named after the Egyptian god of the underworld was definitely not a good person. If my guess is correct, the predecessor of the Stellaris should have been an official member of the Republic, a rank 5 ascendant of the Eternal Road in the celestial genealogy. The crow said gravely, Hell Destroyer Orus's. What? In the silence, Huaishe felt her jaw drop uncontrollably to the ground. Didn't you hear clearly? It's the Hell Destroyer Orus's. The crow spread her little wings. It's a battle-level combat weapon codenamed the Nether God. Once it arrives on the battlefield, it represents the arrival of the Day of Judgment. With the support of the Republic, it's a combat robot that can put the ruler on trial. Wait a minute. Huaishe forcibly dispelled the sudden emotion in his heart and raised his hand to stop her. If I remember correctly, isn't the first stage of the Eternal Road night? It's a night, that's right. The crow nodded. But you didn't specify what they rode, right? It's the 22nd century, young man. There are cars and planes. Who would ride a horse? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Huaishe burst into tears. He grabbed the crow's neck and shook it vigorously. I was just one step away. I was just one step away from becoming a pilot of a giant machine. Why? Why? Because you're poor, young man. The crow sighed. The Eternal Road is the most expensive celestial genealogy. Do you think you don't need money to buy equipment? All the combat power of a knight is above their mounts. They're both Tier 1, but they drive alchemy heavy-duty motorcycles and even exoskeleton armor. What do you drive? Do you think that's a permanent bike? When it advanced to Orus's, do you know how much money it burned through the Republic? Just to prepare armor for it, all the minerals at the 4 borders and even the borders themselves were completely crushed. That 1 or 200 million can't even cover a floor. How can you be so stubborn? Huaishe wanted to cry but had no tears. He looked up at the sky and sighed. He was just a little bit away from becoming a pilot of a superstar robot. People just couldn't know what they had missed out on. Huaishe even had the thought of cutting it down and starting all over again. Okay, the time for chit-chat is over. Orus's is already a thing of the past. The current Stellaris doesn't even have 1% of the power of the former Orus's. At best, it's just a wreckage. Otherwise, as long as it could be used, it wouldn't have been turned into a train that could only run once a year. But the fact that it was once a member of the Republic will not change. The reaction of the Book of Destiny proves this point. There's definitely a fragment of heaven inside it. All official members of the Utopia would receive a personal portrait imprint in heaven and carry that book with them as proof of their identity. In addition to giving them rare assistance and abilities, this book would also grow with them and eventually complete a breakthrough with them, reaching a higher degree of completion. Therefore, we must enter the last remaining consciousness of Orus's, find the location of the fragment of heaven, and determine to what extent this car has been eroded by external forces and whether there's still room to save it. Crow sighed. According to my original plan, if it's possible to recover, I'll just find a way to pack it up and take it away. Now it seems it's most likely dead. Otherwise, it would have reacted as soon as we got on the car. With the fragment of heaven in front of him, Huaishe certainly wouldn't run away. Besides, he was also curious about the former Orus's. Following Crow's instructions, he inserted his S-level authorization card from the Paradise into the gap reserved by the Dreamcatcher and hung it on the bed. After Huaishe lay down, it didn't take long for him to feel sleepy. It was as if there was a silent call from somewhere, gently pulling at him, wanting to bring him to its side. Do you feel it? Orus's is calling you. It has recognized your existence. By his ear, the crow's voice sounded low and gentle. This is your destiny. All the dreams of those who have passed away will be placed in your hands, and only you are worthy of being the true inheritor of this enormous inheritance. Me? Huaisher couldn't help but laugh at himself in his drowsiness. On what basis? A snitch who was more like a prostitute than a prince? A salted inspector who had no ambition and spent all his time fooling around? He didn't even know what he was capable of. The Book of Destiny must be blind to have taken a fancy to him. Compared to the dream that was about to come, everything he had was more like a dream. Why did it have such great expectations of him? Huaisher didn't know. Perhaps one day it would recognize its own unbearable nature. At that time, would it abandon him and leave? Don't be afraid, Huaisher. In her daze, she felt as if someone was gently caressing her cheeks. It was so gentle. Before you can take on this responsibility, I will always be by your side, until the day you no longer need me. It was like an illusion. He couldn't hear the rest of the words clearly. He had already sunk into the dream. After passing through the seemingly endless darkness, he fell to the end of the dark abyss. When Huaisher came to his senses, he was already standing on the burning deck. A scorching wind came from afar. When he turned around, he saw the magnificent scenery of mountains and rivers. But now, at the end of his sight, all the mountains and rivers that he could see had been destroyed. Along with the broken fortress that fell from the sky, it was on the verge of destruction. Under the broken light of the setting sun, the steel giant that was lingering on the edge of death let out a silent cry. Huaisher seemed to be standing on its chest. When he looked up, he could see countless tragic wounds. The steel rolled like open wounds, and real blood flowed out from them. The blood was burning and flowing down, forming a river of lava. Under the solemn steel crown, the giant's face was broken. Its eyes were dim, and its face was falling apart. It no longer had the terrifying majesty that dominated everything in the past. The lower half of its body was broken, and it was unknown where it was lost. It leaned on the mountain in such a sorry state, bathing in the dim light of the setting sun. It was going to die. Even Orus, even the god of the underworld, had to face death. Now death was coming. This was Orus's dream of death, the only remnant of the former level 5 ascendant left in the world. Come here. It was as if someone was calling in his ear, whispering, "Oh, come here." In front of the giant's chest, the steel armor slowly opened, revealing a gap. Sparks flew out from the broken circuit, and a plume of smoke rose. After the gap, flickering lights lit up, illuminating a narrow path. But when Huaisher walked in, he realized that he was not the only outsider here. There was an even more disgusting existence entrenched here. It could be seen everywhere. On the ceiling, on the walls, and even in the corners of the corridor, there were countless specks of purple and red. Those specks looked like mold, but they had the texture of internal organs. It was incomparably nauseating. As if deformed flesh and blood were parasitic on steel, the mold constantly wriggled, forming hollow eyes that indifferently stared at Huaisher who had barged in. A sharp roar sounded. But then, as the door closed, they were isolated behind the door. Blazing electric light shot out, forcibly sweeping away the flesh mold that had seeped into the door, clearing a path for Huaisher to continue forward. Huaisher walked through the huge metal structure, as if he was walking through a steel temple, feeling an indescribable sense of solemnity and oppression. The calling continued, guiding him forward, passing through layer after layer of massive gates until he reached the core. Finally, he arrived in front of the heart. Its heart had already been shattered, and the origin substance furnace, which was the size of a building, was covered in cracks. It had already been completely extinguished. It had stopped beating. But a thin layer of origin substance still slowly rose from the cracks in the heart. It was a metal cube that was as tall as Huaisher himself. If one looked closely, they would discover that it was made up of countless extremely small and complicated components. They were pieced together seamlessly, forming the outline of a book. It was calling for Huaisher's arrival, and when Huaisher followed its guidance and pressed his palm against the steelbook, the smooth surface of the metal suddenly trembled. Countless specks of light appeared, intertwining and moving across the surface of the metal book, displaying the last words that had come from Alice's long ago. Xiong Ho, Mother Xiong Ho? 100,000 question marks rose from Huai Shi's head. Chapter 401. What did you say? Amidst the awkward silence, Huai Shi looked at the huge steel cover in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. The light spot moved again, and soon a new line of words appeared. C. In the silence, Huai Shi took a deep breath, took a step back, and then another step back. He clasped his hands together and said, "Sorry to disturb you, goodbye." He turned around and left, but he was pulled back by an invisible force. Zhu, I don't love you, get lost. Huai Shi struggled to pull his arm back, and then he saw a new line of words appear on the cover again. I've seen Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens. Silence. Awkward silence. Huai Shi took a deep breath again, exhaled deeply, and then told him seriously, "Brother, if you do this again, I'm really going to leave?" After a short silence, new words appeared again. This time, it was finally not some unintelligible word. "Damn you, you're my mast." Seeing Huai Shi's unfriendly expression, the words were swallowed up before he could finish writing. In the end, only 3 words were typed out. Sob. What to do? I really don't want to talk to him. What the hell is this? The former Celestial Genealogy Level 5 Ascendant Osiris is a Martian, and he's also a freaking sob monster. Who can handle this? Don't go, brother, I'm suffering. It's too hard for me. Seeing Huai Shi's expression change, a line of words appeared on the cover pitifully. I've been imprisoned for 10,000 years. Please understand. Ever since Orton passed away, no one has spoken to me. Orton? Huai Shi asked. Who's Orton? Orton was my former contractor, Osiris Pilot. Huai Shi couldn't believe the words on the cover. I'm so miserable. That bastard's death was one thing, but he just had to give me the last bit of origin substance. I was perfectly fine as a book, but in the end, I forced myself to become a spirit. Then, I was locked up here and had to take care of his funeral. It's so hard for me. What? Huai Shi's eyes widened. Wait, if Orton is dead, then who are you? Are you a fragment of the Kingdom of Heaven? Ah, yes, that's right. But now, Kingdom of Heaven is only left with fragments, right? The moment I opened my eyes, the huge Kingdom of Heaven was gone. It was gone just like that. What kind of bad luck is this? What happened back then? Oh, how would I know? As soon as I was formed, Kingdom of Heaven stopped. He only knew that someone was messing with him, but he didn't know what had happened. It was simply more miserable than a screaming chicken. After waiting for so many years, I've already given up hope. I didn't think that someone would bring the Book of Destiny here. Brother, can you do me a favor and take me away? I'm easy to take care of. Just talk to me for 5 minutes every day. No, 3 minutes. No, even 1 minute is fine. The steel book began to shake violently, as if it was crying in a storm. In the blink of an eye, at least 3,000 words flew across the cover, causing Huai Shi's scalp to go numb. If he brought this thing home, how was he going to survive in the future? Brother, please do me a favor. I'm easy to take care of, really. As if it was afraid that Huai Shi wouldn't agree, the cover suddenly shook. I promise to eat less and work more. I don't need insurance or overtime pay. I'll also accept the leader's unspoken rules. Huai Shi began to doubt it from the bottom of his heart. Bro, with your strange appearance, which leader would want to sleep with you? Seeing that Huai Shi didn't believe it, the steel book began to shake violently. Immediately after, a square hole appeared on the cover. The corners of Huai Shi's eyes suddenly twitched violently. You're really well prepared. He was already prepared to get the fragment of the Kingdom of Heaven, but he didn't expect to find such a self-aware and immoral fellow. He wouldn't abandon this book here just because he disliked its chatterbox. Anyway, retrieving the fragment of the kingdom of heaven would also bring him benefit. Moreover, this place looked like a prison. If he left it here, it might really go crazy. Huaishur could empathize with it and understand its pain. Anyone who encountered this kind of situation where they were thrown into a prison and no one cared about them after they opened their eyes and gained self-awareness would not have a good time. If it were Huaishur himself, he might have already torn himself into a few pages and played games with everyone after splitting up. This wasn't the Night of the Witch, where he could activate the acceleration gear. 100,000 years of time was only 1 or 2 months, and the real time was only a short 8 hours. After surviving alone for so many years, it was only a brainless chatterbox that was a little non-mainstream. Could already be called an iron will. But the problem was, at this moment, Huaishur was only in the thin dreamscape of the Stellaris, entering the illusion outlined by the last remnants of Osiris's origin substance. Only his consciousness passed through the network cable and came to this chat room. He couldn't summon the Book of Destiny at all, let alone take anything away from here. After understanding the situation, Huaishur and the fragment could only look at each other. After a long silence, a line of incredulous handwriting appeared on the cover of the fragment. "Why are you so weak?" Huaishur was speechless. He clasped his hands together and said, "Indeed, I overestimated my strength. Brother Fragment, such a treasure of heaven and earth like you must belong to the virtuous. I'll take my leave." "Wait, don't, brother. I didn't mean that. The Book of Destiny is in your hands. Who else can pass Orton's authorization verification?" The fragment asked in disbelief. "I thought there was a problem with my perception module. You don't even have a Tier 5? How did you get the Book of Destiny's approval?" Huaishur replied expressionlessly, "To be honest, one day, I was walking in my backyard when this thing fell from the sky and almost hit me until I was hospitalized with a concussion." A series of ellipses followed by a series of exclamation marks, followed by a mess of emoticons. After the fragment vibrated twice, it seemed to be carefully examining Huaishur, sighing with emotion that there were all kinds of strange things in the world. Even this kind of strange person could pick up the Book of Destiny in his own backyard. If Huaishur reached Tier 5, he could directly use the Book of Destiny to be crowned and become the guardian of heaven. As long as his will reached, he could open a path to heaven at any time, allowing him to ascend directly on the spot. It didn't even consider the possibility that Huaishur was still a newbie. In order to obtain the approval of the Book of Destiny, one should at least be Tier 5. Otherwise, if his life wasn't tough enough, he would have been destroyed by the great creation that entrusted the fate of the entire utopia to him. To the outside world, it should be that a Book of Destiny fell from the sky and landed on Huaishur's body. However, Huaishur's life was as thin as paper, and he was actually smashed to death by this divine artifact. At this time, a Tier 1 ascendant passing by saw this book and determined that it was not an ordinary item. After picking it up, he sighed with emotion. Then, he had a myocardial infarction and died. When the Tier 2 ascendant saw this, he was shocked and died from a stroke. Next, let alone Stage 3 or Stage 4, without the permission of the Heavenly Kingdom's lineage master, even a natural enemy would accidentally slip and sink to the bottom of the abyss if they got hold of this thing. Not everyone was as lucky as that bastard, Zhu Hai, to be able to climb back up after courting death by jumping off the cliff. However, what made it incredulous was that the Book of Destiny had actually appeared in Huaishur's hands. Moreover, it had actually acknowledged his identity without any authority and handed over control to it. This didn't make sense. The Book of Destiny wasn't an anonymous credit card that anyone could use as they pleased. This thing's anti-theft measures were so thorough that it was frightening. It could be said that if the president of the Astronomical Association had not personally entrusted this thing to someone else, then— Wait, the president? All of a sudden, it seemed to have understood something. Even its handwriting became flattering. Brother, you misunderstood. I was just attracted by your shocking talent and admirable talent. I didn't expect you to be so young. As the saying goes, 30 years on the river surface, 30 years on the river bottom. Don't bully a young man for being poor, right? The future of a young man is really limitless. Maybe you'll be Tier 2 this year, Tier 5 next year, and the year after that, you'll be a natural enemy. Huaishir was shocked. He felt like he had seen this flattering look somewhere before, and he was in disbelief. Why are you suddenly so affectionate? To tell you the truth, from the moment I saw you, I knew that you were definitely going to be my brother. The fragment's cover flickered for a moment before it changed its words. Oh no, brother, you're my biological brother. Don't you recognize your long-lost brother? Sorry, I'm an only child, and I don't have such a strange brother. Thank you. Huaishir suppressed his desire to turn around and leave. He took a deep breath and raised his hand, stopping the fragment from talking nonsense. Let's get down to business first. Huaishir asked, How do I get you out of this damned place first? After hesitating for a long time, the fragment could only tell him bluntly, It's very difficult. Recently, Osiris' final origin substance has begun to corrode. You don't have enough ability, so it's impossible for you to transfer it through dreams. You can only make physical contact and contain it. After it stopped talking nonsense, it became very efficient. A map quickly appeared on the cover. It was a detailed cross-section of the Stellaris. At the bottom of the map, there was a red dot. Huaishir leaned over and looked at it carefully. Where is this? The Stellaris vault. Goodbye, goodbye. Huaishir cupped his fists and turned around to leave without looking back. Brother, are you kidding me? How many valuable things are there on the Stellaris? How much money is in circulation? How many precious materials are there? How many ascenders are there? How many Tier 4 people are there? Let alone Tier 4, there are even Tier 5. That's not how you play the game. I'm just a Tier 2 newbie who hasn't even graduated yet. How am I supposed to fight them? Even if you want to die, that's not the way to do it. Chapter 402. Bro, don't go. Listen to me, listen to me. The fragment frantically sent out an invisible force, trying to grab him. It's not the vault, it's under the vault. The power room under the vault. I was locked in the cabinet by those stupid alchemists as a spare part for the auxiliary engine. That's not easy, okay? Huaishir glared. The power room is probably even more heavily guarded than the vault. You're trying to kill me. The Stellaris was not an ordinary train, but even if it was an ordinary train, there was no reason for tourists to run to the power unit of the locomotive to play. In order to guard against lunatics who brought a bomb and dragged everyone into the sky, such an important place would definitely be guarded 24 hours a day. If Huaishir went there alone, it would be no different from breaking into the vault. That's only if those guards are normal. The fragment hurriedly explained, Since yesterday, those guys have let a wolf into the house. They've all become like zombies, their heads filled with nightmares. Otherwise, this place wouldn't have become like this. Bro, what's wrong with you? Don't go. Wait. Its handwriting was getting more and more hurried. This was because Huaishir's body was gradually becoming illusory. The illusion of the dreamcatcher appeared behind him. Then, his consciousness was pulled back to his body by some kind of force. Seeing countless words flash across the fragment's cover, Huaishir, who was in the air, could not help but sigh. I'll work hard, okay? You'd better not have too much hope. He paused and said, And what? The fragment was overjoyed. Bro, just tell me. Your name. Huaishir asked, You have to tell me your name, right? In a short silence, the fragment seemed to be stunned. Just as the scholar poem was about to dissipate, a hoarse whisper sounded in his ears, carrying a deep sense of melancholy and sorrow. Beelzebub, it said, just call me Beelzebub. Huaishir's figure suddenly shook and disappeared in the air. With his last glance, he finally saw the true cover of the steel book under the countless specks of light. Lord of the Flies. Huaishur opened his eyes and panted violently. He could feel sweat dripping down his back. Why am I so tired? Where do you think the Dreamcatcher's power comes from? Could it be that there was an unplugged computer? We're using your origin substance. How can you not be tired? The crow rolled its eyes at him. It raised its wings and carefully lifted the Dreamcatcher from the bedside. It roughly stuffed it into an iron box. Fastened the lid. The Dreamcatcher net, which had originally looked extremely exquisite, was now covered in dust and was abnormally damaged. When Huaishur's authority card was shaken off, the hideous flesh hidden behind it was revealed. At some point in time, strands of purplish-red flesh had entangled themselves on the Dreamcatcher net, forming a layer of broken membrane-like substance. Through the uneven flesh membrane, one could almost see the greedy eyes that were constantly moving behind it. Huaishur sucked in a breath of cold air. If it weren't for it, you would have been eroded by the power of corruption in that dream, right? The crow turned around and asked, So, did you get anything? Huaishur took out the Book of Destiny and threw it over. In any case, everything he experienced would appear in the record. He couldn't be bothered to recount it verbally in case he missed something. Lord of the Flies? After knowing the true form of the fragment, Crow could not help but sigh. It's normal for Faust and Moby Dick to have self-awareness, since they were born with a strong foundation. I didn't expect it to be able to stand at the same height as them with its size. It's really not easy. Is it very difficult? Do you think it's easy for a child who was born with developmental disabilities to enter the national team and participate in the Olympics through his own efforts? Even if there's still a gap between their standards, this obsession and determination far surpasses other existences. The crow praised. In the utopia, the relationship between the members and the record isn't as simple as user and user, but partners who can rely on each other and entrust their souls to each other. In the end, the person called Orton also chose to entrust all his origin substance and soul to it, even giving up all hope of survival so that it could continue to exist. Huaishur was a little surprised. I thought that after being in prison for so many years, it would have a big problem with Orton giving it self-awareness. If it really hated Orton, why would it work so hard to maintain the existence of that dream for so many years? To it, that's the last treasure left behind by Orton. The crow shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, if you were a Tier 5, you could directly save Orton's last dream in the kingdom of heaven. Sister, I know I'm not capable enough, but at least you have to understand that I only became an ascendant this summer. It's not even the new year yet. Huaishur widened his eyes and raised 5 fingers. It's already very difficult to become a Tier 2 in 5 months. You can't expect me to become a natural enemy after sleeping, right? Your future is bright. Work hard, young man. The crow glanced at him with a half-smile and did not laugh at him anymore. Instead, he focused on reading the last record in the Book of Destiny. It was about Beelzebub's description of the Watchers. After comparing it with the abnormalities of the Dreamcatcher, he could confirm it without any surprise. As expected, I guessed correctly. This should be the work of the Fine Night Society. The crow sneered. There's a little bitch who wants to steal the car. Who's the Fine Night Society? Huaishur looked at her blankly. The gray-clothed man had mentioned this name before, but Huaishur did not have a deep impression of it. The crow was shocked and looked back at him in astonishment. How come you don't even know this? Don't tell me you haven't even read the Present Realm Wanted list that the Astronomy Society gave you? Ahem, it's a long story. Huaishur looked away awkwardly. Didn't the game Birth in Progress just come out recently? I've been a bit busy, however. Now that the crow mentioned it, he seemed to have some impression of it. He had indeed seen this name in the list before. It should be in the category of the Abyss sect. However, there were too many names in this category, and the group of scammers was not very creative. They just used the same few words back and forth. At most, they would change the order. This was especially true for people like the rancher who liked to use alternate accounts and had many henchmen. He even liked to take over a magpie's nest and disguise himself as a doll. There were more than 1,800 sects that were suspected to be related to the rancher alone, and there were more than 600 medium-sized sects directly under the rancher. These sects were spread all over the world, including the borders of the present realm and even hell. Sometimes, even if these sects had the same name, they would point to different organizations and groups in hell at different times and places. If you want to ask why sure to remember all of them. I think you're making things difficult for me, Lu Peppa of the Huai Si. Sorry, I don't seem to remember anything other than the rancher. Forget it. The crow shook his head helplessly. Speaking of which, the Fine Night Society's backer is also related to the rancher. The object of their worship is the rancher's cheap *** and birth machine, that lucky player with no ability and no brain. Queen of Rotten Dreams. At the mention of this name, the crow's tone became mocking. Although that's the case, that bitch is still a ruler, blessed by the abyss. Even if she is the most embarrassing one, she is still a ruler. Her ability cannot be underestimated. It seems that she has now suffered the consequences of her own actions. It was rare for the crow to reveal an undisguised disgust and contempt. This made Huai Shi very curious. Do you have a grudge against her? No, to be honest, I've never even seen her before, nor do I have any dealings with her. I just purely hate those who make up the numbers. The crow paused for a moment and asked, if you were a self-reliant, confident, and beautiful big sister, would you admire an ugly, fat, and black bitch who only knows how to sell beeps? Okay, I understand. Huai Shi nodded without hesitation. In fact, he did not understand at all, but it was the right time to agree. He could not show the slightest bit of doubt towards her words, especially the part she used to describe herself. But when he thought of the enemy being the Queen of Rotten Dreams, Huai Shi felt a toothache. This was a ruler who had become the ruler of a large group hundreds of years ago, a terrifying existence who had received the authority of the abyss, the absolute ruler of the mirror world. As long as there was a mirror, her power could be extended to that place. Even her natural enemies would find it difficult to kill her, or even catch her. With the protection of the authority of the abyss, she could go anywhere at any time, not to mention her terrifying ability to use dreams to subtly influence ascendants. It was because of this that Huai Shi was puzzled. What does she want to do? No matter how precious the Stellaris was, how could it catch the eye of a ruler? No matter how weak the ruler was, it was still the ruler of hell. If it had been the predecessor of the Stellaris, Osiris, he might have treated it seriously, but the current Stellaris was nothing. The only part of Osiris here was probably Beelzebub. What was she after? What does she want to do? Haha, you should be asking her what she can do now. Crow sneered. Although I can guess a little, it's none of my business. Most importantly, she ruined our plans. Huai Shi could not help but roll his eyes. The word "our" was used so well that it made it seem like he was not the victim. Anyway, that bitch who can't do anything right really pissed me off this time. Crow angrily walked around the table a few times with its little wings on its back. Suddenly, it turned back, its eyes shining. Idiot, I have another plan. Don't you have a plan? Huai Shi was so scared that his face turned green. Every time you have a plan, I die a horrible death. Then do you want to listen? Crow asked. If you don't want to listen, then forget it. I'll listen, I'll listen. Huai Shi nodded crazily. How would he dare not listen? If he listened, he might have a chance to live. If he did not, he would be played to death. Crow showed a gratified expression, nodded, and said, First, pick up your phone. Huai Shi picked up his phone. Okay then? Open the Astronomy Club's app. Next. Click on the button for emergency report. Yes, that's it. End of the first 2 chapters. Chapter 403. Click the emergency report button below. Yes, that's it. Crow landed on his shoulder and guided him step by step. Take a picture of the Dreamwatcher in the box. Focus, focus, focus. Okay, next, activate your LV6 copywriting skill and report to Jinling. The main point is that when you were sleeping, you dreamt of a pair of extremely lewd and despicable eyes. When you woke up, the Dreamwatcher that you just bought became like this. Yes, write a bit more in this paragraph, just write about how slutty that little b** tch is. Oh, that's a good description, right? He followed Crow's instructions and edited it. He also deleted a lot of personal attacks on the Queen of Rotten Dreams. A beautiful report was written. 3,000 words were precise and ingenious. The format was perfect, the words used were appropriate, and the writing was beautiful. It vividly expressed the integrity and infinite love of a member of the Astronomical Society, as well as the panic and helplessness of a 17-year-old boy. Huai Shi read it several times. He wanted to stuff this into the Book of Destiny to make up the word count. It was written so well. As expected of me. After clicking the send button, he realized that he had sent another small report to the organization. Crow sighed and said, "As the saying goes, dogs rely on their master's power. You unlucky kid, you haven't ridden the Astronomical Society's car yet. This time, we'll let you have a taste. Can't you find a better adjective? As long as you get the idea." Crow flapped her little wings happily. "This time, let's do something big." When Huai Shi heard that she was going to do something big, he began to have a headache. "Don't get yourself into trouble again. Don't worry, I won't trick you." Crow was like a scumbag. She hugged Huai Shi's shoulder and said that she would treat him well in the future. This made Huai Shi feel more and more unreliable. Sooner or later, he would be played to death by this black-hearted woman. He raised his head and looked at the time. It was only 2:00 in the morning. Huai Shi, who was physically and mentally exhausted, rolled his eyes. He lay back on the bed and fell asleep. 1 minute after the report was sent, the preliminary review report was sent to London Extension What? The staff on duty followed the regulations and sent 6 copies of the report to the Jinling branch, the Jingdu branch, the L4 headquarters, the Clock Tower Management Department, the Border Management Inspection Center, and the East Asia District No. 4 Management Countermeasure Center of the Central Command. 2 minutes later, the ear-piercing sound of a phone rang in the intelligence gathering room of the East Asia Division. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the bright lights, the phone was picked up by a palm. After 15 seconds, the summary of the information was completed. 2.5 minutes later, the preliminary sorting was completed and the results were out. 3 minutes later, the report from Shanghai Inspector Huai Shi appeared in the database of the Clock Tower Management Department. It was listed as urgent. Hongqiao Beta Branch begins preheating preparation. 3 minutes later, the Management Strategy Center approved the application for the emergency upgrade of the Asian border security level. At the same time, the new operation permit was issued. The command authority was transferred to the former Dark Army Secret Operations Division. The new supervisor's authority application report was approved and passed. At 4.5 minutes, an ear-piercing alarm sounded from the inspection ship on the Endless Sea. 5 minutes later, the Iron Casting Legion was on standby. 6 minutes. 7 minutes. 8 minutes. When the 9th minute arrived, the huge institution hidden behind the curtain had finished preheating. Thousands of personnel on duty began to perform their duties and tasks in accordance with the regulations. Tens of thousands of people received an urgent notice from the higher-ups and entered a standby state. A total of 301 people's holidays were temporarily cancelled, and more than 600 emergency recall notices were sent to different depths of hell. Because the Astronomy Association raised its eyes and looked at the abyss under its feet again. 10 minutes later, Huai Shi turned over in his sleep and began to snore. If you have a dream, do it. Don't wake up. The next day, at 8 o'clock in the morning, Huai Shi's door was knocked on. The old man in charge of hosting the concert hall reminded softly outside the door, "Mr. Huai Shi, you have a friend visiting. Would you like to wait in the lounge for a while?" "Friend?" Huai Shi was taken aback. "Is it a man or a woman?" "It's a woman." The old man's answer gave Huai Shi an ominous premonition. Looking back at the emergency report he had just sent out last night, the ominous premonition suddenly became stronger. 3 minutes, I'll be done immediately. Huai Shi jumped out of bed and began to quickly wash up. After putting on his clothes, he pushed the door open and rushed to the lounge. As soon as he pushed the door open, he saw a slender silhouette in the spiraling fragrance of tea, but it was completely different from what he had expected. Yuan? The girl in the gray skirt heard this and raised her head slightly. Looking at Huai Shi's confused look, she seemed to have noticed something. "Mr. Huai Shi, did you misunderstand something? It seems that I came at the wrong time." Huai Shi reacted quickly. She did not say anything that would spoil the mood like, "Why is it you?" After coughing twice, she sat down and put on a businesslike smile that she had learned from old Lu. "What brings Miss Yuan here?" At the same time, he secretly raised his guard. For some reason, he always felt a strange feeling in his heart. The calm and indifferent girl in front of him was not as simple as she looked. The purpose of coming to the Stellaris was not as simple as she said. Especially after learning about the existence of the Fine Night Society, he was even more vigilant. The world was always so crazy. Who knew what kind of madness was hidden under those beautiful faces? More importantly, when the girl looked at him with a pair of scrutinizing eyes, Huai Shi's sense of crisis faintly rose in his heart. It was as if there was something dangerous hidden in her eyes. Yuan put down the teacup and seemed to ponder. "Soon," she said directly. "I came here this time mainly to apologize to you for Wang Su's stupid words yesterday. I hope this will not affect your relationship with Ah Zhao." No. Huai Shi waved his hand with a look of indifference. Anyway, he was satisfied with showing off. After that, he would not remember the names of some people. If Yuan did not mention this matter, Huai Shi would have almost forgotten the name of that guy. "That's great." Yuan smiled slightly, and her tone was slightly relaxed. Ah Zhao's character is relatively unsociable. It seems that he has no friends. This time, to be able to see him get along so well with others, to be honest, I was a little surprised. "He didn't give you any trouble, did he?" No. Huai Shi hurriedly waved his hand. "We help each other and understand each other. Although Yuan Zhao is sometimes a little impulsive, he is still very good." Looking at the flawless smile of the girl in front of him, Huai Shi felt that something was wrong. Why was the conversation between the two full of déjà vu, like parents meeting in front of the school gate? "Speaking of which, aren't you only a year older than Yuan Zhao? You are only 16 now." A certain someone who had completely forgotten that he was also 17 couldn't help but complain in his heart. "In that case, I will not disturb you. I will take my leave." As if she had come specially for this, after Yuan finished speaking, she politely got up and said goodbye, which made Huai Shi a little stunned. "That's it? It's not good to leave so soon." Huai Shi got up to send her off and habitually asked, "Why don't you leave after breakfast?" Yuan's footsteps paused, and she turned back to ask, "Won't it be troublesome?" "Of course it will be troublesome." Huai Shi could not help but want to slap his own mouth. "Why are you being so courteous when you have nothing better to do? Just send her away quickly and be done with it. Why are you talking so much nonsense?" "Not at all, it's just a matter of a pair of chopsticks." Huai Shi pretended to be generous and enthusiastic and waved his hand. "It just so happens that I haven't eaten yet. Let's eat together." Then deference is no substitute for deference. Yuan readily accepted, smiled and nodded, and stood in the same place. The subtext seemed to be, "Why are you still standing there? Hurry up and lead the way. So your Yuan family is so rich, why do you have to take advantage of me for breakfast? Huai Shi ignored the shameful incident of wanting to freeload lunch yesterday. He kept a smile and opened the door for her. Without waiting for Huai Shi's order, the old man in charge of the concert hall had already prepared 2 breakfasts in the dining room, and considerately prepared coffee and black tea. The breakfast was a Western-style combination of bread, toast, and fried eggs. The amount was not much, but it was very delicate. The fire control of the fried eggs was quite good. A little pepper and salt were sprinkled on the sun-fried eggs. After the fork poked the sun-fried eggs, the thick egg yolk flowed out, making people drool. It had to be said that it was quite pleasing to have a well-bred girl sitting across from him eating. After Huai Shi took a few glances, he politely withdrew his gaze and bowed his head to eat his share. He paused for a moment. He seemed to have heard a short and fragmented sound, which made his back faintly cold. When he looked up, it seemed that there was nothing unusual. Yuan still had her head down, eating her share. She noticed his gaze and looked up in confusion. What's wrong? Is there something on my face? No, there isn't. Huai Shi reluctantly smiled and lowered his head to continue eating breakfast. After finishing breakfast, Yuan put down the teacup and suddenly said softly, "Excuse me for asking, Mr. Huai Shi, do you have any plans today?" No need to be so polite. Just call me Huai Shi like Yuan Zhao. Huai Shi shook his head. Although I'm waiting for a call from the astronomy committee, I'm quite free during the day. What's the matter? When he said the astronomy committee, he slightly emphasized the pronunciation and paid attention to Yuan's reaction. But of course, he did not see anything. Or rather, he was never the kind of person who was particularly good at reading other people's faces. If Yuan hadn't been so shocked that the teacup in her hand had fallen under the table, he wouldn't have been able to see anything at all. Yuan still smiled. That's great. To tell you the truth, I've been practicing the violin recently. Yuan put her hands in front of her knees and said in a dignified manner, I came to Stellaris this time because I wanted to buy a suitable zither and music score. But after looking at it for the whole afternoon yesterday, I really don't know what to choose. Can you give me some advice? Okay. After hesitating for a moment, Huai Shi nodded. If you want to go out, I'll change my clothes. Please wait a moment. When Huai Shi turned around, he heard the same fragmented sound again. It was like an illusion. He did not stop moving, as if he did not hear anything. He pushed the door open and went out. Just after Huai Shi left, the girl sitting under the light bowed her head and elegantly picked up the teacup. In the shadow, the corner of her mouth slightly raised. In the corner, the black bird quietly overlooked all this. As if foreseeing the next scene, her eyes became happy. Chapter 404. When Huai Shi changed his clothes and walked out of the bedroom, the old man in charge of the concert hall showed a puzzled look. Are you going to go out like this? Huai Shi was puzzled and looked down at himself. There was a simple gray iron windbreaker with defensive power, a pair of sturdy and durable overalls that had been treated with alchemy, a pair of boots that would not have a problem running over mountains and valleys, and a god-tier satchel that contained the sword of virtue and other equipment that could be used in emergencies. He was armed to the teeth, enough to deal with any trouble. Flawless. Is there a problem? The old man's expression suddenly became complicated. He put down the towel in his hand. Please wait a moment. Within a few minutes, he came out of the warehouse with a set of brand new clothes in a storage bag. He also chose a pair of leather shoes, a shirt, a tie, and a pocket handkerchief for Huai Shi. After putting them down, he looked at the young man in front of him and asked, Do you have the habit of using tie clips? There's no need, right? Huai Shi hesitated whether to accept this kindness or not. He waved his hand and said, To be honest, I'm already very satisfied to be able to live here for free. I don't need anything else. But these are all within the scope of the membership service. The old man asked doubtfully, and immediately understood. If you don't feel that these don't match your identity, I can contact the tailor shop later to provide you with an exclusive customization service. No, I just feel that one-sided demand is not a normal relationship. Huaisher waved his hand and said seriously, if I can pay, I'll feel much better. The old man was silent for a moment. I understand the problem. He suddenly laughed and asked seriously, you're now a rather successful ascender. You've made a name for yourself. But, will you consider giving up the time and love to invest in music? Huaisher shook his head as a matter of course. Then, music will not give up on you. The old man put the clothes in his hand and said seriously, this hospitality comes from your heartfelt love for art, regardless of anything else. This is a small reward for your passion for art. You deserve it, and you deserve to enjoy such honor. As he spoke, the old man representing the Hell United Music Association placed his hand on his chest and bowed. He calmly said, unless you abandon all of this one day, we will never leave you. After a long silence, Huaisher couldn't help but laugh. Is this a blessing or a curse of art? It's just an insignificant reception. The old man took a step back and left respectfully. Huaisher turned around and looked at the low-key and solemn formal attire on the table. After a long time, he couldn't help but shrug and change into a new set of clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror. In the mirror, the handsome young man in formal attire grinned at him, revealing a smile. It looked pleasing to the eye. Sorry to keep you waiting. Huaisher pushed open the door to the lounge and nodded to the girl inside. Miss Yuan, can we set off now? When Yuan looked up and saw the new Huaisher in front of her, she was stunned for a moment. She didn't react in front of the standard business smile of old Lu. After a long time, she noticed her absent-mindedness. Just call me Yuan. She hid a flash of emotion and said politely. Just as he was going out, Huaisher heard a small sound behind him again. This time, it seemed to be closer. Where's Yuan Zhao? He asked casually. He didn't come? He seemed to be staying up late playing games last night, and then suddenly caught a cold. Now he's lying in the hotel and sleeping. Yuan shook her head regretfully. He doesn't want to get up no matter how I call him. Is that so? Huaisher nodded absent-mindedly. Her heart sank as she recalled the calls she had made to Yuan Zhao that hadn't been picked up. But at the same time, although he didn't know what Yuan was planning, he actually began to look forward to it. What would be waiting for him outside? Today's Stellaris seemed to be different from yesterday. It was still bustling with noise and excitement, but there were more trained policemen in black on the streets with cold expressions. They didn't hide their vigilance at all, and their cold eyes swept across the faces of the passengers. There were also more security and scanning equipment. Under the surveillance cameras everywhere, the originally happy and relaxed passengers couldn't help but feel depressed. What's wrong? Huaisher looked at those people in confusion. It should be about what happened last night. Beside him, Yuan said, I heard that a lot of people had nightmares last night. It seemed to be some kind of curse. Even the management of the train wasn't spared. Mr. Huaisher, did you rest well? I slept very well. I didn't have any dreams. When I opened my eyes, it was already morning. Huaisher replied. Maybe it's because I bought the dreamcatcher during the day yesterday, so no nightmares disturbed me. Miss Yuan, what about you? I didn't sleep much. Yuan shook her head. I can't sleep well outside. I only slept for a while when it was almost morning. If it's convenient, let's buy 2 more dream catchers later. I hope it will work. Okay, but I don't remember where the stall was yesterday. Let's try our luck. Huaisher considerately asked, do you need to find a place to rest for a while? No, let's go. Yuan quickened her pace and led the way. The place they were going to was not far. They only went up 1 floor, and it was on a rather bustling street. Outside the quaint shop, there was already a store manager waiting in front. Welcome again, Miss Yuan. The manager nodded and smiled politely. The violins you named yesterday have just been delivered to the shop. Would you like to see them now? Of course. Thank you. Yuan nodded and walked into the shop behind the door. The moment he stepped into the shop, Huaishe felt several eyes vaguely looking at him. When he looked around, the people dressed as shop assistants quickly withdrew their gazes. He didn't know if they had made preparations in advance or if they really wanted to buy violins. Soon, after black tea was served and they were asked to wait for a moment, 3 violin cases placed between aluminum alloy boxes and sponge were brought up. Just by looking at the 3 exquisite violin cases in the metal boxes, one could tell that the price was not cheap. Moreover, there was a faint fluctuation of origin substance. It was obvious that the painstaking effort and will of the violin maker was put into it. Even without opening it, Huaishe could feel that it was a rare masterpiece. After the violin cases were opened, the manager began to enthusiastically introduce the origin and history of the 3 violins. One of the oldest violins could be traced back to several decades ago. After such a long time, there was still no visible damage. Under the careful care, it was even more precious. After the manager finished the introduction, Huaishe asked curiously, "Generally speaking, shouldn't there be a violin maker stationed in your shop to provide advice to customers at any time? Why don't I see one?" The manager's smile stiffened. His eyes moved slightly, as if he wanted to look somewhere. Then he restrained himself and showed an apologetic expression. "Because of health reasons, the violin maker can't come to the shop to provide service to customers these 2 days. Please forgive the inconvenience." "It's fine. Anyway, even if he came, he might not be better than me." Huaishe calmly waved his hand, but the manager's expression twitched. He didn't know if he admired Huaishe's face or was curious where this idiot came from to have such inflated self-confidence. In fact, there was no need to choose. The 3 violins were all rare and good violins. Moreover, the difference in tone was not big. Although the price was also very beautiful, it was not a problem for the rich and overbearing Jin family. The only difference was the suitable playing style. This was also not important for beginners. People who started to learn absolutely had to go through the most rigid and rigorous training to lay a good foundation. After 3 or 4 years of hard practice, they could talk about playing style. Talking to a novice about this was as absurd as talking to a primary school student about how to choose a university major. Huaishe casually pointed to the one that looked the best and suggested to Yuan, "You can try this one." The girl picked up the violin. After pausing for a moment, she skillfully played a section of the small concerto. This section of the performance was not bad. It was obvious that she had a good foundation. After a short performance, she looked back at Huaishe and asked for his opinion. "Very good. Although I haven't played the violin much, I can hear that your sense of sound is very good. Your basic skills are very good." Huaishe casually picked a few small problems and talked about it. Yuan bowed her head and played again. This time it seemed to be better. Her comprehension was very good. But the vibrato was always a little bit off. Huaishe stood behind her and corrected some of the omissions in her performance. Unconsciously, the 2 people were very close to each other. He could almost feel her temperature. Just as Huaishe was about to reach out and correct her finger technique, he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me, can you show us your documents?" 2 patrolling guards walked into the shop and broke the original atmosphere. Huaishe took a step back and saw that the shop assistants had already gathered here. They seemed to be watching, and in the reflection of the glass of the cabinet, Yuan's smile flashed with a hint of gloominess, but it quickly disappeared. "No problem." Huaishe handed over his documents and let them check. When they saw the sign of the Astronomy Association on Huaishe's inspector ID, the 2 patrolling guards were stunned for a moment. They respectfully took it with both hands, verified it and returned it. Soon they left. Yuan picked up the violin again and was about to say something when she heard Huaishi's voice. "Sorry, I'm going out for a smoke." He directly pushed the door open and went out. There was definitely a problem. In the alley next to the pedestrian street, Huaishi leaned against the wall of the carriage. He lowered his head and lit the cigarette in the corner of his mouth, recalling everything that had just happened. If the guards didn't push the door open, what would have happened? He narrowed his eyes and pondered. A voice came from the side. "Can I borrow a lighter?" "Okay." Huaishi subconsciously handed the lighter over, but the other side didn't take it. When Huaishi looked up, he reacted and opened his eyes wide. "Why are you here?" Chapter 405. Under a sun hat that was particularly incongruous in the Stellaris, he was wearing huge sunglasses that covered most of his face like that of a tourist. But she was not wearing a fluttering white dress, but a rather capable woman's suit and leather boots. The visitor tilted her head and looked at him, looking at his shocked and seemingly frightened expression with a faint smile. Huaishi was sluggish for a long time. "Why are you here?" Let me think." Ai Qing thought for a moment and said seriously, "Probably to prove that the boss who blacklisted you because you screwed up the hike is not so cold and heartless, right? It's really hard for you to say such a long string of words in one breath." Huaishi's eyes widened to defend himself. "Don't talk nonsense, I didn't say that to everyone." He quietly calculated in his heart. He just said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 8 times only. Ai Qing didn't speak, just looked at him until Huaishi put his hands together and sincerely bowed his head to beg for mercy. "Sorry, I was wrong. I feel that this time it's not you Dongri who came, which seems to have disappointed you." Ai Qing glanced back at the shop. "Or, did I disturb your date with a young girl who is suspected of being in the Goodnight Society, which made you have a sense of panic of being caught cheating? Isn't the premise of cheating that I have a girlfriend?" Huaishi rolled his eyes. "You also found her suspicious." Thanks to an emergency report from someone, all the members of the East Asia No. 4 decision room had to stay up late last night to check all the 120,000 passengers on the ship. More than 4,000 people were preliminarily classified as suspect. Ai Qing said, "By the way, I'm one of the people who stayed up late. This woman you're looking at hasn't slept for 48 hours, and she has to watch her former subordinate go shopping with the suspect and talk about art. Please be nice to her." Is there a kind girl who is nicer to a poor man who was blacklisted and abandoned after a failed elopement? Huaishi really wanted to say this, but when he thought about how she had actually rushed here for his urgent report after disappearing for so long, to be honest, he was a little touched. "Thank you for your hard work. That's quite sincere of you." Ai Qing nodded in satisfaction and took a step back. She raised her hand to show the ID in her hand and pointed the Golden Astronomy Society badge at his face. "Inspector Huaishi from Xian High," she announced. "Due to your outstanding resume and upright conduct, you have been temporarily recruited by the Central Command. Welcome to the former Dark Army." Following her words, the projection of the stars representing his military officials quickly appeared above Huaishi's head. Immediately after, a shadow-like gray edge appeared and adorned the stars. The thorny thorn emblem, which represented the authority of a field officer, was wrapped around it. The temporary authority change was completed, which meant that Huaishi's identity had jumped 3 levels within the Astronomy Society. Ai Qing watched as Huaishi stared at the star indicator above her head with a curious expression. Only after he had his fill did Ai Qing wave her hand and disperse the projection. "From now on, until you get out of the car, you have to listen to my orders. In short, if I tell you to jump out of the car, you will jump out of the car. If I tell you to take the blame, you will take the blame." She paused and asked seriously, "You should understand that I'm not making an analogy, right? I'm too familiar with this. I used to do it every day." Huaishi sighed. He patted the suit on his body and bowed to Ai Qing. Your tool, Huaishe, is online. Do you have any orders, madam? Then, this will be the first order. Ai Qing raised her hand and pointed to the cigarette in the corner of her mouth. Light a fire for your boss. Huaishe raised his hand, rubbed a wisp of alchemy fire and handed it over. Ai Qing lowered her head slightly, leaned forward and took a deep breath. The spiraling smoke blurred her face. Welcome back. Huaishe couldn't help but laugh. Only now did he feel that Ai Qing was close to him. Ai Qing shook her head. I'm just passing by. Don't be happy too early. What's the specific task? Do what you're supposed to do. Act as yourself and listen to the command when necessary. The work content is the same as before. Be a qualified target. She took out a box from her pocket and threw it over. Take this. What's this? Huaishe asked casually. Is this a special product for me? Where did this love token come from? Or is it an engagement ring from someone who has a conscience? Isn't our relationship a bit too fast? I'm only 17. I haven't reached the legal age yet. Aya, should we start by holding hands? Through the sunglasses, he could feel Ai Qing's gaze that said, Son, the whole family is disappointed in you. It's just a Bluetooth headset. Don't think too much, okay? The box was opened. Inside was a piece of mechanical creation the size of a pinky nail. It was just enough to stick into Huaishe's ear without attracting attention. After seeing Huaishe put it on, Ai Qing nodded in satisfaction. Very good. Now, if you can't control your mouth, I can blow up the bomb in your ear along with your head. It's almost time. You should go back. Next, continue shopping with the suspect. She turned around and waved her hand. Don't worry. Use your cowherd instincts. I have confidence in you. What about you? Huaishe asked. I still have things to do. See you tonight. She walked out of the alley. Her figure blurred for a moment and disappeared into the crowd on the street. It was as if she had never been there. Only Huaishe stood in the alley with a deep face, lost in thought. Was he going to start doing illegal business under the orders of the emperor? 3 minutes later. Thank you for your guidance. In front of the shop, Yuan, who was carrying a piano case, nodded to Huaishe and said goodbye. Since I have bought the piano, I won't waste your time. You're leaving? Huaishe was stunned for a long time. He was ready to fight a battle of wits, but he didn't expect that Yuan would leave. He didn't even have a chance to start a legal business? She really only bought a piano. Was she playing hard to get? You're underestimating me, Yuan. A true Saint Seiya would never be fooled twice. Although he thought so, he couldn't help but politely say, Do you want me to send you back? No, Uncle Ping has already come to pick me up. Yuan nodded and looked at the old servant waiting at the corner of the street not far away. She nodded to Huaishe and said goodbye. Thank you for your help. Let's say goodbye. After she turned and walked 2 steps, she stopped and turned back to ask, Will Mr. Huaishe also come back to the banquet tonight? Huaishe spent a long time to remember that she was talking about the invitation letter sent to him by the host of the concert hall. It seemed that the organizers had specially organized a banquet for the luxury cabin passengers with status on the Stellaris. Originally, he would never miss such an opportunity to eat and drink for free, but after the incident with the Fine Night Society and the Queen of Rotten Dreams, his heart was filled with worries about the safety of the present and the safety of the world. He was not in the mood to eat and drink. Maybe. He replied ambiguously. There may be other things at that time. Then I look forward to seeing you again. The girl in the gray skirt nodded and said goodbye, then turned and left. Only the confused Huaishe was left in the same place, not knowing what was going on. He wasn't sure if Yuan had anything to do with the Fine Night Society, but there were still too many mysteries that he couldn't solve, leaving him puzzled. But when he turned and left, he heard a distant and fragmented voice behind him. It was like an illusion, but it made Huaishe feel like there was a knife on his back. He stiffened for a moment and turned back abruptly, but he saw nothing. Only in the depths of the crowd, the slender figure of the girl gradually walked away. Her fluttering gray skirt was swallowed by the crowd and could no longer be seen. In the captain's room of the Stellaris, it was not a narrow and cramped carriage, but more like a glorious and gorgeous palace. Under the exquisite decoration, the rare sunlight shone down from the mimicry window overhead and fell on the desk. Someone from the Astronomy Society? The dignified old man lowered his head and flipped through the report, looking at the overly young face in the information, and couldn't help but sneer. After so many years, the directorate is getting more and more outdated. Any cat or dog can be an inspector. With that said, he looked up and ordered his assistant. Send someone to contact him. Tell him to behave and don't make trouble on the bus. There's no need to be rough. Didn't the information say that he has a rotten relationship? Give him a few women and let him have fun happily and get out of the car. The assistant nodded and left. Then, he threw the information into the trash can. Work continued. Until the internal phone rang again. Mr. Rudolph, a commissioner from the directorate, is here to visit. The Astronomy Society again? Rudolph frowned unhappily, but in the end, he adjusted his bow tie, straightened his body in the chair, and said to the internal phone, "Let him in." "Shall I prepare tea for you, Mr. Rudolph?" "No need." The old captain shook his head. "I'm afraid that the person who comes is not someone who can be satisfied with tea. Just don't let anyone disturb us." The internal phone call was hung up. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. After Rudolph invited the person to come in, it wasn't a stern-looking middle-aged man who pushed the door open. Instead, it was a woman who looked younger than Rudolph had expected. Only when he took off his sightseeing sunglasses did his sharp eyes give off the feeling of a commissioner of the Directorate of Administration. Unfortunately, she was still too young. In this day and age, any random person could criticize his work. When he thought of the pests on the bus who came to play with women, he became even more unhappy. He was afraid that this person was not friendly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Rudolph." The young woman greeted politely. "I hope my arrival did not disturb your afternoon tea time." "Please sit down, madam." Rudolph pondered for a moment and said, "I believe your purpose is not as simple as afternoon tea, right? Since you ask so directly, I will not beat around the bush." Ai Ching sat in the chair and said seriously, "In short, I need your cooperation to perform a search mission on the train." "Sorry." Rudolph shook his head and flatly refused. "That's impossible." Chapter 406. The atmosphere of the conversation stiffened in an instant. Faced with Rudolph's tough refusal, Ai Ching did not get angry. Instead, she crossed her fingers and placed them on the table. "Can you give me a reason? Mr. Rudolph, you didn't even listen to what I said. It's just a small operation. I just want to check the list of passengers on the Astral. It shouldn't be difficult for you, right?" "This is the private property of the Fred family, madam." Rudolph frowned and replied unhappily, "The Astronomy Society has no law enforcement authority on the Astral. We won't let our guests be disturbed because of some groundless problem." Ai Ching was silent for a moment, then suddenly asked, "What if I insist?" "Then I'll insist." Rudolph said indifferently, "It's my duty. Please forgive me." Perhaps the Astronomy Society's tiger skin would be useful in other places, but it would not work on the Astral. The Astral itself was inextricably linked to the Astronomy Society. If there were no high-level connections, how could they get the heritage of the Utopia and install Osiris's auxiliary engine in their car? Although the ancient group was operating on behalf of the Astral, its true owner was the Fred family, a pure-blood lord in the Aegean Sea region of Rome. If the world of the Ascended had a social structure, then these families, who had been involved in the Astronomy Society since its inception, would undoubtedly be at the top. They were known as purebloods, inheriting the holy name of their ancestors. Every member of the Orthodox lineage, even in the embryo, inherited the blood of the ascended from their ancestors and part of the source substance of the high-level stigmata. A family had a complete path of ascension that was absolutely compatible with their bloodline. In addition to huge wealth and influence, they even had a large border as their private territory. The head of the Fred family, the howler of this generation, was not only a noble member of the Roman Senate, but he was also a level 5 ascended at the top of the Sea Emperor path, known as the Endless Sea Abyss. Only under the operation of him and a few other pure-blooded families could they win the investment from the Aeon Group, turning the astral into an annual event on the Endless Sea. It was precisely because of this freedom that even the Astronomical Society would not interfere with, that this place flourished and became an almost semi-public black market. Nowadays, who knew how many people who couldn't see the light of day were moving around here? If the police of the Astronomical Society were to randomly arrest and search people, not to mention whether they could continue next year, he wouldn't even know how to explain it to his master. In his opinion, this was just another attempt by the border administration to get involved in the affairs of Stellaris. No matter what, he would not give the Astronomical Society any leeway to interfere. Really? That's too bad. Ai Ching sighed, but didn't say anything. She just stood up and said, "Then I can only hope that nothing bad will happen." In the silence, Rudolph slowly raised his eyes and suppressed his anger. "Little girl, are you threatening me?" "No, it's just a kind reminder," Ai Ching answered calmly. Across the desk, she reached out her hand and waited for Rudolph's response. But Rudolph still sat on the desk indifferently, turning a blind eye to Ai Ching's raised hand. He shook his head coldly and said, "You can leave." Ai Ching didn't leave, just maintaining her original posture. She waited quietly. Even if Rudolph's eyes gradually became mocking, she still didn't withdraw her gaze. "Do you know, Mr. Rudolph, you have made several mistakes." Ai Ching sighed softly. "But one of them can still be salvaged, such as now." She lowered her head and stared into the old man's eyes, telling him word by word, "As a commissioner of the Central Decision Room, I represent the Astronomical Society to come here, follow your etiquette and talk to you. Then I should enjoy preferential treatment and your respect. You can be stingy with your tea, you can humiliate me, but you can't refuse the Astronomical Society's handshake. No one can." Rudolph's expression froze for a moment, but he was still cold and hard. "What if I say no?" "You can't say no, because you don't have the right." Ai Ching looked at him with pity. "If you stay here today and wait for me to take back my hand, then you, no, the Fred family you represent, will no longer be a friend of the Astronomical Society." In the dead silence, Fred's expression changed. Even though he was extremely unwilling, he still slowly stood up under Ai Ching's mocking gaze. He raised his hand in humiliation and shook her hand, then retracted it as soon as they touched. "You can leave," he said with a pale face. Ai Ching shrugged, turned around and pushed the door open. In the corridor outside the door, a man wearing a horse mask leaned against the wall, holding a cigarette in his hand. He was carelessly flicking the ash on the precious carpet under his feet. Under the watchful eyes of several guards, wisps of smoke curled up from the mouth and nose of the silicone horse mask, sometimes forming an F shape, sometimes a U shape, and sometimes a C shape. Seeing Ai Ching come out, the last letter dissipated into the air. He turned around and asked curiously, "How was the talk, Sir Commander?" "Don't ask a question you already know the answer to." Ai Ching reached out and took the bag in his hand. She took out a bottle of spray and carefully sprayed it on her hand. Then, she wiped it twice with alcohol wipes in disgust. "Let's go," she said. "He's just an idiot who takes advantage of his seniority. He's not infected, so you don't need to clean him up." "That's good." Tony shook his hoarse face. "After all, these young men are watching me. I'm quite stressed. Goodbye, everyone." After saying goodbye politely, He threw the cigarette butt on the floor and left behind Ai Ching. When they were out of the door, Tony asked casually, "You did it on purpose, didn't you?" Ai Ching didn't seem to know what he was talking about. "You deliberately angered him, didn't you?" Tony said. "You didn't go head-to-head with the Fred family and fulfilled your duty. No matter what happens in the end, the old man will take all the blame. Not only did you complete your task, but you also gave the border administration a reason to intervene. Everyone wants to thank you." "You know what, Tony?" In front of him, Ai Ching suddenly stopped in her tracks. "Among all the evil virtues, the most intolerable is stupidity. It's second only to thinking that you're smart. There are always people who think that because they have a powerful backer, they are a big shot. But in fact, they don't know anything about real power. They are so ignorant that it makes people laugh." Even if I have reminded him that I am a commissioner in the decision-making room of the directorate, he still tries to bury his head in defending his insignificant power and dignity, like a hen protecting her eggs. Until now, he doesn't even know why I am here, let alone what he is rejecting. She looked back at Tony and asked, "Do you think it's necessary to save such a person?" Tony just shrugged his shoulders and shook his head. There was no answer. He always felt that if he nodded in front of this black-hearted woman, she would definitely give him this difficult and honorable task. "Don't worry, it won't happen," Ai Ching, who was walking in front of him, said without looking back, "because there is a more difficult task waiting for you. After all, compared to idiots, I prefer people who think they are smart." Tony's hoarse face suddenly froze. He felt annoyed and sad from the bottom of his heart. Why did he have to expose her for no reason? Was the lesson not enough? With such a boss, he felt that he had to start thinking about where to open a hair salon after he retired from the military. He heard that the hair transplant industry in Shambhala was very developed. It seemed that he could consider it. In the captain's office, ever since Ai Ching left, Rudolph had fallen into a strange state of uneasiness, anger, and a hint of panic. It was as if something had gone wrong. After rejecting the next few meetings, he pondered for a long time. In the end, he wrote a detailed report about the arrival of the commissioner of the Astronomical Association and reported it to the higher-ups. Then he paced back and forth in the office, waiting anxiously. It was not until the evening that he received a response from the higher-ups. As soon as he opened the email, his heart sank to the bottom of the valley. It was ice-cold. The official content of the email was only 2 words. It was an angry reply from the family head. Short and direct. Trash. At about 3:00 in the afternoon, Huaisher finally heard the first good news in a row. His violin had finally arrived. It was sent through the special channel of the Hell Music Association and was sent to Huaisher's room by the old man in charge of the concert hall. There was another piece of news. In a few hours the local association may temporarily move, the old man said. "Please forgive me for asking, but do you plan to go to the capital?" Hearing that the Hell Music Association was about to close, Huaisher quickly realized that these big organizations must have heard the news and were preparing to leave. No need. He shook his head and refused. "After all, I am still a member of the Astronomical Association. In that case, I wish you victory." After the old man smiled mysteriously, he respectfully left the room and closed the door for him. In the silence, only Huaisher and the violin case in front of him were left. Just like the swordsman in wuxia novels who could feel the sword energy, Huaisher sat in front of the violin case and could feel a faint resonance from it. More importantly, it was now time to open the treasure chests. Huaisher rubbed his hands, took a deep breath, and opened the buckle. He was ready for a surprise. He didn't see any destructive golden light, not even a violin. He only saw another smaller violin case. Wow! Huaisher was dumbfounded. "You're still playing with Russian dolls, aren't you?" He reached out and opened the case inside the case. Then it was still a case. Huaishe opened it again. This time, the violin case was almost the size of a violin, but there was still a case inside. It was really a Russian doll. He suddenly became furious and tore open the last lock. He saw the case inside. The case was still a case. Finally, when he opened the palm-sized case, he saw a note on a black velvet cloth. "I hope you'll be able to enjoy this surprise prepared for you." Surprise? Surprise my ass. He was surprised, but Huaishe didn't see what the surprise was. In the case, other than the note, there was only a heavy bracelet left. "It's almost the end of the month, please." Chapter 407. Where's my cello? Where's my big cello? Did you guys steal my equipment? It wasn't until the furious Huaishe picked up the bracelet and carefully examined it that he was finally able to see the faint outline of a cello from the amber ornament on the bracelet. So this was the surprise? "We made a specimen of your cello and placed it in amber. Are you surprised? Are you happy?" With a sliver of trust in the Music Association, Huaishe followed the instructions on the back of the slip of paper and fastened the bracelet onto Huaishe's arm. It was made of 4 or 5 millimeter thick metal rings. At first glance, it looked like some kind of watch. A square piece of amber was embedded on the back of his hand. The symbol of the Hells United Music Association was engraved on the front, but after being modified by alchemy, it was shockingly hard. It probably wouldn't shatter even if it took a direct hit from a bullet. If Huaishe was confident in his skills, he could even use this thing as a small shield. Even though it looked like he was playing with an entire village, the amber could still be flipped upside down. The position of the amber could be flipped over. After flipping over, the delicate outline of the violin would be revealed. The slip of paper said to inject origin substance. Huaishe injected the origin substance. Then, he was almost blinded by the sudden appearance of a bow. Huaishe subconsciously leaned back. Immediately afterwards, he saw a massive cello fly out of the amber. He hurriedly caught it. It wasn't heavy. Rather, it was unexpectedly light. For a moment, Huaishe wasn't able to stop in time, and he almost fell backwards. When he steadied himself and carefully examined the cello, he discovered that the temperature of the cello seemed to be exactly the same as his body temperature. More importantly, his body's sense of touch spread out as Huaishe's 4 fingers touched the board. He could feel the low rhythm of the cello's breathing. He very quickly realized that it was his own breathing. His origin substance and his perception flowed through the body of the cello, and the sound of his heartbeat echoed within the cello's resonating cavity. It was still the same familiar shape and the same feeling, but inside it felt as if it had been reborn and had become completely different. When Huaishe gently pulled the strings and the first note flowed out, it was as if a thin lingering sound was dancing in the air and echoing in his body. "Do you want to try playing?" The old man who appeared at the door smiled and handed over a music score. "The concert hall is ready to be used at any time." Doesn't it cost money?" After Huaishe accepted the music score, he could sense the ancient origin substance contained within. Without a doubt, this was a precious piece of music from the Society's collection. Huaishe had seen the exchange price list. Every single one of them was so expensive that it made him cry. However, every one of them had a huge attraction, causing him to grit his teeth and hover between spending money and saving money. "This is part of my collection. It's not part of the association's collection." The manager smiled and asked, "If you don't mind having another audience, can you let me experience your performance skills? Isn't performing meaningful because there's an audience?" Huaishe also smiled. "Then, please excuse my rudeness." The manager nodded and snapped his fingers. In an instant, Huaishe's vision blurred and he was already sitting on the stage. The old manager had changed into formal attire and sat in the front row, looking forward to the start of the performance. "Please begin, Mr. Huaishe." Then, a beam of light shone down from above Huaishe's head, illuminating the place where he was and the music score on the shelf that moved without any wind. Edgar's Cello Concerto in E minor. I feel like it's going to be difficult. Huaishir took a deep breath and calmed his mind. He stared at the music score that seemed to gradually come to life. Subconsciously, his fingers moved. A low and sorrowful sound of the zither burst out from his fingertips. He didn't even read the score carefully. It was almost like he was playing it by sight. The moment his eyes saw it, his fingers reacted. Huaishir himself hadn't reacted yet, because he was so focused that he forgot himself. It was as if his body had suddenly become empty, and he had abandoned all distracting thoughts. In this meditative state, his body began to move instinctively, and the origin substance began to move, smoothly playing the first part of the movement. Then, countless phantom-like violinists slowly appeared behind him. They bowed their heads and provided an incomparably fitting accompaniment for this performance. They followed Huaishir's melody. Their remnant spirits were guided by the notes of the cello and merged into the gradually vast and mighty sorrowful movement like flowing water. So beautiful, subconsciously, the manager leaned forward, wanting to get closer. His two eyes were shining. As if they were burning with flames, he was intoxicated by the melody. Yes, that's it. That's right. The old man grabbed the armrest excitedly, but he was desperately restraining himself from crushing the armrest. This kind of melody, this kind of performance, wasn't it what he had always yearned for? Wasn't it because he was intoxicated by the pure beauty of art that he served the association so that he could often listen to such outstanding performances? It was too sorrowful, but also too beautiful. This kind of melody, no matter how many times he listened to it, he couldn't get enough of it. Now, the low and sorrowful sound of the cello floated towards him from the stage. It was like a farewell hug, carrying a sweet sorrow as it tightly gripped his hands. The lingering sound spread out from his bone marrow. The sound of the cello gradually rose, rapidly rising from the reverberation. After a short pause, the low sound of a horn and the sound of a clarinet burst forth from the sorrowful lingering sound. As a result, the reverberating sound of the cello rose again, turning into a wave that swallowed the entire concert hall. The vast and solemn performance thus began. Huaishir bowed his head amidst the surging melody. His hands gripped the bow as he controlled the vast and mighty current. Amidst the pure performance, the origin substance in his soul burst forth, brewing and colliding with the cello's resonating cavity. In the end, it actually formed a faint qualitative change. This was the combination of the countless strands of vitality in his blood and the ashes of the origin substance. Along with the melody, the mountain ghost's sacred mark sang a sonorous and sorrowful song. Countless abyssal life forces were constantly changing in this sorrowful cello melody, as if they could change at will, from flowers to trees, and then from trees to vines. The cycle repeated until finally, the abyssal life forces that were originally unevenly distributed seemed to have been reconstructed. Whether it was the quantity or the quality of each other, there were faint changes. They precisely completed the balance in the movement, harmoniously combining with each other, forming a complete abyssal plant ecosystem. Vigorous growth. The mountain ghost's sacred mark was constantly extracting Huaishir's ashes, absorbing nutrients from the darkness and death of the ghost, and the power of life sprouted. After the cold winter passed, hundreds of flowers bloomed on the fields of spring. He had never experienced such a harmonious feeling. Huaishir seemed to have once again returned to the time when he was advancing, transforming into countless plants, uprooting and growing in the soil and rocks, branching and sprouting. Regardless of whether it was spring, summer, autumn, or winter, he coldly overlooked all the sorrowful changes in the world. He quietly gazed at the withering glory. Until time passed, he woke up from his dream, immersed in the lingering sound. He let out a long sigh. After a long, long time, the sound of applause came from below the stage. "Thank you for your performance, Mr. Huaishir." The manager slowly stood up and bowed to the performer on the stage. Wonderful performance. It was worth the trip. I'll take this as a reward for your warm hospitality over the past few days. Huai Shi nodded reservedly. I should be the one thanking you. It was as if he had gone through a fierce battle. He was exhausted, and his origin substance was depleted. However, his spirit was unexpectedly full. He was bursting with energy. Even though he hadn't played for a long time, his fingering hadn't become rusty. Now that the cello had undergone a complete transformation, he was like a fish in water. His technique had advanced by leaps and bounds. He didn't know whether it was because he had entered an explosive period after a long period of settling down, or because he had grasped the charm of this piece of music during this period of time. The effect of his performance was even more astonishing than he had imagined, and the feedback it brought was even more frightening. Cello Performance LV-15 Sword and Blade Technique. Performance Technique LV-13. This wave of experience had given him too much. His cello performance skill, which had been dormant for a long time, had risen by more than half a level. If this had happened in the present world, Huai Shi would probably have won so many awards that his hands went numb. Even his sword and blade technique, performance technique, had benefited greatly. It had risen to level 1.5, and was no longer the same as before. Apart from his own comprehension, it was most likely the effect of this piece of music. A piece of music? A manuscript composed by a musician who had passed away. It contained the origin substance that had been condensed from the transformation of exquisite art, giving it an effect similar to that of a relic from the border. Huai Shi carefully picked up the piece of music, which had already begun to turn yellow and curl up, and handed it back with both hands. This time, he had gained too much of an advantage. There was a limit to the number of times a piece of music could be used. After Huai Shi took the lead, its effect would probably be greatly reduced, and he would only be able to use it a few times. The manager did not take it. He just smiled and said, "It's a piece of music that I happen to collect. It's of no use to me. After all, I'm just an audience. It can only be used in the hands of someone who truly loves it, right?" He said, "If you feel bad about it, you can play a few more times for me next time. Thank you for your kindness. I'm very grateful." Huai Shi did not refuse again. He gratefully put away the piece of music. "You seem to have a few visitors." The manager looked back in the direction of the door. "It's inconvenient for me to disturb you for the rest of the time. I'll take my leave now." His figure slowly dissipated. Suddenly, Huai Shi was back in the lounge again. There was a knock on the door. "I didn't interrupt your performance, did I?" Ai Qing, who was outside the door, looked at his calm appearance. "You seem to have comprehended something new?" "It's just a little progress." Huai Shi wanted to prop himself up, but his hands were weak. Only then did he feel weak and tired. Ai Qing was not the only one who came. There were other guests who came with her. When Huai Shi saw the horse-faced ascendant leaning against the wall, he suddenly realized. "Ah, you're not that fortune teller." "Call me Tony, thank you." Like a barber at the village entrance, the long-lost member of the Iron Caste army shook his limp horse face. He said to Huai Shi, "I'm mainly here to be a tool this time. Please don't mind me." "Likewise, we're all tools." Huai Shi nodded in agreement. "We're all tools. We must get along well later." Ai Qing glanced at the two of them after they were done with their small talk. "Are you done catching up? It seems that I don't need to introduce you again. I'll give you a chance to exchange experiences later. Next, let's introduce the other helpers who came specially." She stepped aside, revealing the guests in the corridor. Chapter 408. Other than Tony, there were 3 other people who came in with Ai Qing. One of them was a young man wearing a loose t-shirt and jeans. His body was covered in chains, and he carried a toolbox with one hand. There was a faint smell of engine oil. His other hand was holding a phone, and he seemed to be focused on something. It was hard to tell if he was a rebellious young man or a skilled maintenance engineer. It was a mature woman in a black suit and skirt. Her hair was as red as fire, and her eyes were sharp. She smiled at Huai Shi in a friendly manner. The last one was a middle-aged black man wearing loose sportswear and a pair of white sneakers. He looked like he had just returned from a morning run. The roots of his hair were faintly white, and it was impossible to tell his age. However, his pitch-black beard was long enough to hang in front of his chest, and it was finely braided with copper rings and bone beads. When he saw Huai Shi, he subconsciously looked at Huai Shi's hands. He was stunned when he saw Huai Shi's slender fingers without any calluses or scars. Huai Shi finally propped herself up and welcomed the arrival of her teammate. The first to be introduced was the young man. "This is Mr. Fan from the Jinling branch. He's a level 4 ascendant in the Dongxia system. Can you introduce him in detail?" The second half of the sentence was for the young man's opinion. "It's fine. It's not like he's a rare thing." The young man who was focused on his phone finally looked up. Compared to his old voice, what was even more shocking was the iron light under his eyes. It was as if there was a layer of transparent glass between his eyes. Countless rotating gears could be vaguely seen behind his pupils. When he spoke, it was as if there were hundreds of tiny metal springs vibrating in his throat. More importantly, she could sense that Su Chen's body contained far more metal than a normal person's. Abundant amounts of origin substance flowed through his body, constantly changing the state and nature of the countless pieces of metal. Huai Shi felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. In the reflection of the mirror of nihility, his skin was peeled off, revealing countless complex chips and circuits inside his body. He looked like a robot. "Oh? Did you sense it?" Mr. Fan, who was either a young man or an old man, revealed a gratified expression. "As expected of an S-class. The younger generation will surpass us in time." In front of Huai Shi, he raised his hand. In an instant, his skin and joints disintegrated and rapidly transformed into various tools. Yanshi. Huai Shi suddenly understood. The fourth-grade stigmata of the Eastern Summer Country had combined the miracle of alchemy with the human body. After abandoning the fragile body, he pursued the path of eternal existence. He was the combination of dozens of relics from the border, and he was equivalent to a mobile alchemy workshop. "Half of my main body is at sea and the other half is spread out on this ship. What you see now is the mobile mechanism responsible for support and maintenance, Divine Armament Gongxing." Mr. Fan raised his hand and patted him on the shoulder. "I've heard about you from Old Wu. You did well." "Old Wu?" To you the term fox should be more familiar. Mr. Fan looked at him with admiration. "Young man, you're pretty good to be able to make that bastard suffer." Huai Shi's eyes twitched. Damn, why do so many people like to see the fox suffer? After the introduction, without waiting for Ai Qing's introduction, a mature middle-aged woman with red hair came up and shook hands with Huai Shi. Andrea, third-grade salamander, part-time thermodynamic scholar. Ai Qing added, "Ms. Andrea is a physics professor at the Ivory Tower. This time, she is here to help." The Ivory Tower. Hearing this name again, Huai Shi focused. This name was quite famous both in the Astronomical Society and in the world. As an educational institution that was one of the best in the world, it mastered many unique alchemy and science and technology, and could be called a monopoly in the academic world. Not only was it influential in the academic world, but it also had a close cooperation with the archaeological team of the Astronomical Society. Their military force was not to be underestimated. It was said that they secretly had a military force that belonged to the Academy, which was formed by more than a dozen large groups of abyss. However, Huai Shi did not care about this. Instead, it was because the Ivory Tower might be one of the few remaining subordinate institutions of the Utopia. In the past, before the Utopia was divided, The Ivory Tower was an organization that existed as a training institution and logistics agency. With the fall of the Utopia, the Ivory Tower broke away from the Astronomical Society and became an independent institution. But it was still inextricably linked to the Astronomical Society today. Sensing Huaishi's concern, Andrea quietly winked at Huaishi from behind with a friendly smile. In all fairness, the candidate sent by the Astronomical Society could be said to be just right. A master proficient in machinery and alchemy was the home field on the Stellaris. The combination of thermodynamics and the flame stigmata, salamander, caused a terrifying destructive power. But it could be controlled accurately and would not sink the entire Stellaris during the operation. And the last one was the backup and insurance for this operation. Aladdin Edward Blackbeard, a third-order stigmata from the American lineage. The middle-aged man with a long beard came up and shook hands with Huaishi. I'm not very good at fighting. My main duty this time is to be the driver. Of course, Huaishi would not take his modesty as the truth. If the Stellaris really exploded, the person in front of him would definitely be the one who lived the most comfortable life. As a third-order stigmata with a ghost ship, with the power of a legendary pirate's command, going to the endless sea was as comfortable as wandering in the backyard. Besides which pirate ship did not have cannons. Without Sir Commander's orders, I may have to be on standby. He smiled enthusiastically. But don't worry, if the Stellaris explodes, I'll take everyone away. When they shook hands, Huaishi felt the calluses on his hands formed from years of holding weapons, and the smell of gunpowder on his cuffs. Under Roland's training, he had developed an instinct to observe muscles and bones. Just by looking at him carefully, he could tell that there was a whole volcano hidden in this man's body. The way he walked and stood, as well as the division of his muscles, showed that he was proficient in at least 3 kinds of weapons. He might even be proficient in the martial arts of using origin substances. After analyzing, Huaishi realized that he seemed to have entered the state of a traitor again, habitually preparing to backstab his teammates. He could not help but repent in his heart. Huaishi, how could you do this? You're too dirty. After the introduction of the other members, it was Huaishi's turn. But when it came to him, Ai Qing became concise and comprehensive. She said casually, as for this person, he is also a member of the operation. Level 2 Sublimator Huaishi, Stigmata Mountain Ghost, the inspector of the Astronomical Association, and a lot of part-time jobs. As if to emphasize Huaishi's role, she emphasized, at the same time, he was the first inspector to discover the abnormal situation on the Stellaris and submit a report, 4 hours earlier than the entire border surveillance of the lighthouse. His teammates naturally would not underestimate him. Most of them might not have seen Huaishi's live broadcast, nor did they know that Huaishi had a long list of frightening titles. They did not know much about Huaishi, but as a member of the Astronomical Association, they would at least use their internal authority to check their teammates' resumes. Then, they would be shocked by the S-level evaluation thrown in their faces. The main point was that he was 17 years old. At such a young age, he could have such a brilliant resume. Either he had a strong background or he had a frightening life. It was possible that he had both. But no matter what, there must be a prerequisite. He must be able to fight. His style was solid, his character was upright, his actions were decisive, and he was the nemesis of Green Sun. He was simply the predetermined double red stick of the Asian region in the future, okay? As for the chaotic relationship between men and women that was rumored outside, it was a small problem. The flaws could not obscure the beauty. Moreover, with the self-restraint of everyone present, even if they encountered someone who came to leech off the credit, they would only throw him aside without a trace. In any case, it was fine as long as he did not get in the way. After a brief introduction, everyone could be considered to have met and gotten to know each other. Unfortunately, What followed was not a leisurely afternoon tea time. It was time to get down to business. After everyone had taken their seats, AI Ching began to give out the mission briefing in the lounge, distributing the information in her hands. As for the main operation personnel, the Bureau was not so ruthless as to impose intelligence control. They straightforwardly told them that the main mission target was the ruler of the abyss, the Queen of Rotten Dreams. But in fact, this had nothing to do with the people here. The decision-making room was not so lacking in manpower that they were sent to deliver food. Their mission was very simple. They just had to control the members of the Good Night Society on the Stellaris and ensure the safety of the ship. To be precise, in AI Ching's opinion, what they needed to ensure was the safety of the 120,000 passengers. Whether the Stellaris exploded or not had nothing to do with them. You guys are responsible for dealing with the members of the Good Night Society. Leave the rest to me. AI Ching said calmly. I have already applied for the Army's assistance. In addition to the Iron Cast Army on standby at the Rainbow Bridge, there are more than 200 lurkers from the Dark Shadow Army who will assist me in taking over the Stellaris. Thanks to a certain captain who is trying to mend the pen after the sheep is lost, the next operation will be much easier. Just half an hour before coming here, she had already obtained control of the Stellaris from Rudolph and completely grasped the initiative. Tony was actually right. She actually did it on purpose. In order to make Rudolph jump into the pit, she did not even show the official documents from the Bureau. But Tony had been a tool for too long. He only guessed her motive, but did not understand her purpose. Her purpose was not to make Rudolph take the blame, but to obtain the initiative on the Stellaris without compromise. Most importantly, before the operation began, all the obstructing management were swept away. Directly going to the door and lowering her head to talk about cooperation, how could it compare to someone suddenly repenting and handing over the control of the Stellaris with both hands? Otherwise, she would have to go through the tug-of-war negotiations first, and in the next operation, she might even be a hindrance. In order to protect the Stellaris, she did not know how many twists and turns and how much trouble she would have to go through, and in the end, she would have to share the credit with others. Why should you take all the good things? It was better to throw this kind of hindrance into the endless sea first. If she simply wanted to find a scapegoat, she would never have paid a visit so early. Instead, she precisely timed the operation before it began. She would not give Rudolph, no, it should be said that the Fred family behind him had such a long time to react. No matter how smart Fred was, it would be useless to put the blame on him. It had to be said that communicating with the eldest daughter of the Grand Duke of the Howlers was a very pleasant thing. Talking to smart people was easy and simple. But the disadvantage was that smart people were often very smart and could not take too much advantage. Thanks to Rudolph's reckless action, this time, AI Ching not only obtained the control of the Stellaris, but also made the eldest daughter of the Grand Duke owe her a favor. As for how to use this favor to maximize the benefits, it needed to be discussed in the long run. The most important thing now was to clean up the Fine Night Society. This was the first time she had monopolized this aspect. No matter who it was, no one could mess with her. No one could King think about it. End of 2 updates. Love you, Mua. Do you have a monthly ticket? Chapter 409. After the meeting ended, AI Ching assigned tasks, and the others hurriedly left. Only Huai-Shi, who had no origin substance left, was still lying on the sofa, feeling the weakness of running out of mana. Then, he suddenly had a bold idea. Since he said that it wouldn't matter even if the Stellaris exploded, don't think about it. The vault must be returned to the Fred clan. AI Ching glanced at the guy who was thinking about eating peaches. She knew what he was thinking even if she used her heels to think. If you move fast enough, you can still make it in time to see the demonic gold bank's dwarves perform the ceremony. In 3 minutes, they will freeze the entire vault and connect it to the demonic gold bank. At that time, the entire vault will be forced into a sealed state. Unless the 1-year limit expires, even if the natural enemy comes, they won't be able to open it. Tisk. Why are they so stingy? Huaishur rolled his eyes and continued to pant on the sofa. A small bottle was placed in front of him. What is this? He propped up his head and looked at it curiously. The thumb-sized bottle seemed to contain 10 or so grams of liquid, but it didn't have much weight. There was also an extremely thin straw inside. It seemed like he could only suck a single drop if he squeezed it tightly. I didn't think that the higher-ups would be so generous, Ai Ching said. The origin substance essence extracted from the Silver Sea has no side effects. It can quickly restore anyone's origin substance. For you, 2 drops should be enough. If you take more, you won't be able to take it and the origin substance will go berserk. Oh, the little blue bottle that gamers loved the most. Huaishur's eyes lit up. How do I use it? Take it orally, inject it, inhale it, and apply it as you please, but keep your hands steady. Don't spread it outside, Ai Ching reminded him. The price of each drop is 8 origin substance crystals. Huaishur's hand trembled, and he almost dropped the bottle on the table. Damn, that expensive? A standard origin substance crystal was 4 ounces, which was only about the size of a finger. The standard exchange rate was 2 million USD, so 8 crystals were 16 million USD. What exactly was in this little bottle when he realized that he was holding more than 100 million US dollars in his hands? He began to tremble nervously. Finally, Ai Ching couldn't stand it anymore. She grabbed the bottle and used the straw to draw 2 drops on Huaishur's face. Suddenly, Huaishur felt a warm current spread from his body, as if he was soaked in warm water. When he felt the dried-up origin substance rapidly replenish his body, he couldn't help but blush and let out a groan that could be easily misunderstood. Just as he was about to shout a few more times, he saw the muzzle of a gun right in front of his eyes. It was pitch black and icy cold. He quickly calmed down and shut his mouth. Very quickly, the handgun was returned to his pocket, along with the origin substance that Huaishur coveted. Old leader, don't be anxious. Huaishur blinked his eyes reluctantly. I can't taste it. Can you give me more? If you say one more word, I'll pour the entire bottle into your mouth. Ai Ching glared at him, as if she had already predicted that he would embarrass himself. She pulled out a small plastic tube and tossed it into Huaishur's arms. It was an emergency kit that she had prepared beforehand. It was sealed well, and the workmanship was exquisite. The front end of the plastic tube could be unscrewed, allowing the origin substance inside to be squeezed out. Unfortunately, there wasn't much of it, only about 2 drops. That was enough. Huaishur happily stuffed the tube into his pocket, squeezing out an honest smile that said, "The leader is so nice to me." Alright, stop being so disgusting. Ai Ching shook her head. Before I get to work, what's the question? Huaishur was confused. Do you really not have any self-awareness at all? Ai Ching sighed. You've been looking at me with that. I actually have a question to ask, but I don't know if it's convenient expression for half an hour. Fine. Huaishur shrugged helplessly. They were too familiar with each other. He couldn't hide anything from her. Is it related to the Stellaris? To be precise, it's related to the mission. Huaishur hesitated for a moment, then asked directly, why didn't you organize an emergency evacuation? Even though it was good to be able to get outside help to deal with the Fine Night Society, he didn't understand. Generally speaking, shouldn't they first organize an evacuation when it involved 120,000 people? Why would they go through so much trouble to preserve the Stellaris? It was just a train. No matter how luxurious and expensive the train was, it shouldn't be a problem for the Astronomy Society. Just like Ai Ching had said, if it blew up, then it blew up. The Astronomy Society was a large organization. It was nothing more than compensation. When the time came, there wouldn't be anyone else. Wouldn't it be easier to deal with the fine night society? Ai Qing couldn't help but shake her head, rubbing the bridge of her nose. I should have guessed it a long time ago. You really haven't looked at any of the files or information. How do you do your job as an investigator? Every day I eat, drink, and play games. At night I have a cup of warm milk, do some gymnastics, and go to bed. Fang Shu said that I'm very healthy. What's wrong? Ai Qing suddenly had an impulse to kill this bastard on behalf of the Astronomy Society. She slowly shook her head. You must have a lot in common with Chai Fei. You know this too? Huai Shi was stunned. This kind of shameful thing should be killed. I'll explain it to you from the beginning again. Ai Qing sighed, once again understanding his salted fish nature. In the Fine Night Society, except for a few high-level priests, other people don't even know that they are members of the Fine Night Society. What do you mean? The literal meaning, she said. For many people, they may just have a nightmare at the beginning. They dream of something, and then the next day they forget about it and continue to live normally. After a year and a half, they will have another nightmare and wake up again. Then the third time, the fourth time. There will be a day when the dreamer will start to doubt whether they are living in a dream or reality. At this stage, the nightmares will become longer and longer, and the time between them will become shorter and shorter. The memories in the dream will become deeper and deeper, gradually eating away at the original personality. At the final stage, the original memories and personality will be worn away by the long nightmares, leaving behind only a walking corpse that worships the rotten dream. This is the state that most of the members of the Fine Night Society are in, and the priests of the Fine Night Society can even freely control this process. In most cases, they will separate the part of the Fine Night Society from the normal part, just like there are two different consciousnesses in the same body. Once the disease is incurable, as long as the priests release the last shackles, they can immediately complete the change of will, from an ordinary person to a fanatical believer of the rotten dream. As she said this, Ai Qing flipped open the information in her hands, showing it to Huai Shi. Right now, in the surveillance of the Stellaris, there are a total of 7,000 ascenders and 100,000 ordinary people from various borders, apart from the priests in the management who have been marked as suspects. Who knows how many people are infected and how many have been replaced by the rotten dream. If we rashly evacuate, there will definitely be people who will get away with it. It might even alarm the Queen of the Rotten Dream, making the next operation of the Central Bureau fail. That is why we can't retreat, Ai Qing said. Not only can we not retreat, we even have to maintain the current state of the train. Once we prepare to make a move, we have to completely wipe them out, or else there will be no end to the trouble. Huai Shi was speechless. Screening out the believers of the rotten dream from the normal people in a train full of passengers, even if they had the help of the Astronomy Association's intelligence agency, this was definitely not an easy task. In particular, they had to maintain the current calm on the surface and not let the priests of the Fine Night Society notice anything strange before they truly began their operation. Just thinking about it made him feel like his head was about to explode. Don't worry about other people's business. You just need to complete your own task. Ai Qing got up and looked down at the time. Are there any other questions? Huai Shi shook his head. Then have a good rest. Ai Qing opened the door and said, Tonight may be very busy, and there is no time to rest. Huai Shi saw that she was about to leave and subconsciously reminded her, Be careful. Ai Qing's footsteps paused slightly. She looked back at him and seemed to be stunned. Soon, she nodded and said, I will. The door closed. Since there was still some time before the mission began, Huai Shi did not intend to waste time. After taking a nap for half an hour, he took off the suit that the manager gave him, folded it neatly, and put it into a bag. He changed back to his original clothes and tidied up his belongings before opening the bedroom door. In the corridor outside the door, The old man who was cleaning with a duster turned around. Are you leaving? Yes. Huaishur nodded and returned the suit with both hands. Finally, he handed over a piece of paper. This is my number. If you need it in the future, no need. The old manager shook his head and refused. Fate is always so wonderful, isn't it? Let's look forward to the next time we meet. I still insist that you accept it. Huaishur said, the association is the association, and we are us. Otherwise, I may have to find another way to compensate you for your loss. The old man raised his eyebrows slightly. Soon, he took Huaishur's note with both hands. I will keep it well. He took a step back and bowed to say goodbye. I wish you success. Thank you. Huaishur smiled. He watched the old man and the other decorations in the concert hall turn into phantoms and leave. He took one last look at the bleak room and pushed the door open. In the corridor outside the door, 12 guests who had been waiting for a long time looked up at him. They were wearing a layer of extremely high-tech black armor, and their arms and bodies were covered with a layer of simple and dexterous exoskeleton. Even their faces were covered in a sealed helmet. The edges and corners were sharp. It was as if they were walking steel. Iron Legion, brass squad reporting to you. The leader walked up and saluted Huaishur. His tone was calm and composed. Major Huaishur, following orders, we will assist you as operatives to complete the next mission. May I know your name? Lattice 1-1 to Lattice 1-12. Code name. Huaishur understood. Other than that, is there anything else you want to tell me? No. Crystal 1-1 handed over a box. The commander said that you are free to do as you please. Inside the box was a heavy pistol, but the style was completely different from the ones Huaishur was used to. After pushing out the magazine, he could see that alchemy elementium crystals had been applied to the bullet to ensure that it could be used normally in the abyss. Huaishur weighed it, nodded slightly, opened the safety, and casually inserted it into the holster on the saddlebag. Then let's go. He pulled out the sword of virtue and turned in the direction of the exit. The mission has begun. Chapter 4:10. The tracks had stopped again. As the train's cabin flipped, they appeared outside a luxurious suite. The gate closed, isolating the inside from the outside. This time, Huaishur saw a few restless figures through the phone's screen. They seemed to have received some news and became vigilant. One of them was sitting on the sofa, constantly dialing, but no one answered. Some of them even took out an umbrella-like frame from their backpacks and propped it up. A stream of light spilled from it, enveloping the room. It protected them. The people from the Astronomy Society are here. The man in the red robe raised his weapon and ordered the other stiff believers in the room. Get ready, fight them. They fervently chanted the drowsy incantation, and the power from the rotten dream blessed their bodies. The believers' bones protruded from under their skin and quickly bent down. In the end, their bodies were covered with barbs, and rotten flesh fell from their faces, turning into something disgusting. Along with Yenshur's warning, there was also a reminder. The remote support system is online. Do you want to apply for use? Wei Sorino. Nonsense, of course it would be yes, yes, yes. Huaishur's finger almost pierced through the screen. Then, he felt a sudden tremor under his feet. He felt the tracks under his feet suddenly push outward by 10 centimeters. Not only that, but the entire upper carriage of the Stellaris began to quickly adjust. Then, with a whistling sound in the distance, Huaishur vaguely saw a container-like carriage rising rapidly through the gaps between the frames. In the process, the steel plate on it quickly fell off, revealing a barrel comparable to a tank's caliber. It quickly locked onto its position and aimed at the luxurious suite. Huaishur pressed down with his finger. The entire container suddenly shook, and dazzling flames spewed out, pushing the red-hot steel and bursting out a low roar in the enclosed space. Crystal 1-1 took a step forward and raised the shield on its arm in front of Huaishur, blocking the hurricane for him. But the ear-piercing roar was still about to pierce Huai Shi's eardrums. In an instant, the cannonball passed through this fleeting gap, shattered the cabin's planks, broke into the room, and disintegrated inch by inch in midair, forming a diffuse iron light. Thanks to the reflection of the mirror of nothingness, Huai Shi could tell that it was thousands of fine iron pieces falling off the cannonball like petals. With the detonation of the explosives, it flew in all directions. The umbrella-like shield was penetrated by the iron rain like tinfoil and easily shredded. Whether it was the priests or the zombies who tried to resist, at this moment they all turned into bursts of bloody mud, pasted in the devastated room. Huai Shi's scalp tingled. In this sealed space, even if Huai Shi had a premonition of death, she would not be able to escape from this level of cannon fire. If he went in, his fate would be no different from the other unlucky ones. Crispy skin was so embarrassing, but now was not the time to be in a daze. Huai Shi waved his hand and led the Iron Legion into the room. There was no need to break in. The hammer of pain tore down the entire wall. Then, he saw a badly mutilated figure trying to get up from the bloodstains on the ground. Deformed eyes opened one after another on his broken body, looking at the attackers ferociously. Then Huai Shi rushed up and hammered. With the help of the flame spray, the power of the hammer of pain was applied evenly to the half-dead priest, directly blowing him up. It was over. It was like going on a trip. Happy and easy. Finally understanding how convenient it was to have the support of an organization, Huai Shi was almost moved to tears. If it were him alone, he would have to fight alone until next year. Now, he had manpower, assistants, guns, and cannons. It was so good. Increase the power and don't stop. After smashing to his heart's content, Huai Shi picked up the hammer, let out a long breath, and stopped Crystal Lattice 1-11 from loading the bomb. I'll do it. He poured a bottle of Ramses Fury on the ground and threw a pinch of alchemy fire on it. The metal fuel immediately burned vigorously. Under his control, the alchemy fire quickly swept over and spread out as if washing the ground, engulfing all the remaining flesh and blood. Not even a speck of ash was left. Only a piece of iron half the height of a person was left in place, still emitting a blazing scarlet. Done. Leaving the still-hot carriage, Huai Shi waved his hand. Next. In the process of moving, Huai Shi heard the continuous sound of cannons in the distance. It seemed that after the firepower support came online, everyone became happier and happier. With his own eyesight, he could see a steel rope hanging down in the distance. A dozen soldiers on a mission slid down from it, their bodies already dyed blood red. Sensing Huai Shi's gaze, one of them even waved at him rather casually and gave him a thumbs up, indicating that he could do it. The iconic horse head had already turned scarlet, as if a Fergana horse had come from somewhere and become a spirit. Huai Shi waved his hand, indicating that he could do it too. The two sides crossed each other. But after a few seconds, their trajectory suddenly changed, and the wristwatches on everyone's wrists lit up with a message of a change in mission. Emergency rescue, prepare to attack. In the blink of an eye, all the members of the Crystal Lattice squad moved forward quickly, protecting Huai Shi in the middle. Then, heavy bulletproof shields unfolded from the boxes on their shoulders and arms. After joining with each other, they formed a temporary bunker. After a series of crisp sounds, the machine guns were set up in the slots next to the shield. Scorching steam suddenly spewed out from the armor on their backs. Then, something like 2 hydraulic valves opened, causing their armor to rapidly expand, increase in value, and reach an astonishing thickness. The injection of the liquid elastic defense layer was completed, and the second, third, and fourth power channels opened. The 12 cast iron soldiers instantly completed the transformation from a medium-sized unit to a large unit and entered the attack phase that they were best at. Yensha reminded, "Prepare to eject." "Sir, please grab me." Crystal Lattice 1-1 raised its hand and motioned for Huai Shi to come closer. Immediately after, two grooves that looked like guide rails suddenly rose from under their feet and were inserted into the interface of the boots, completing the installation. They were ejected directly from the spot. It was like firing a cannonball. Huaishe only felt like he was thrown into a roller coaster. In an instant, a long road flew by in front of him. As the deck shattered, they fell from the sky and smashed into the huge bathtub. Countless splashes of water splashed. He smelled blood. Even if there wasn't enough space, the Stellaris still had a bathtub. The facilities could be said to be luxurious. More importantly, in addition to the countless common services, there were even more uncommon and illegal services that were openly provided here. It was claimed that it could bring customers a heaven-like feeling. But now, it seemed that the customers who should have gone to heaven had taken the wrong bus and instead boarded the Hell Express. They were almost dead. More than half of the dazzling bathtub hall was now covered by countless flesh and blood. Between the thousands of ferocious eyes and the tumor, an old man's figure floated in the air, completely naked. The rotten dream almost solidified behind him, turning into a pair of deformed scaled wings that emitted blazing flames. The attacking soldiers had long been frozen in place. They were fragmented, and bones pierced out of their twisted limbs, growing deformed. At this moment, they had become trees of flesh and blood in pain. Stubborn. As Huaishe and the others descended from the sky, the naked old shaman raised his scarlet eyes and stretched out a finger. A terrifying wave of air erupted as he raised his finger, smashing into the shields of the cast iron soldiers. The entire formation shook and took a step back. Then, the old shaman raised his hands, and the trees of flesh and blood formed by countless tourists and soldiers began to grow vigorously. Sharp bones and flesh quickly extended, piercing toward Huaishe and the others. Without waiting for the attack to launch, Crystal 1-1 took off the bomb at his waist and threw it forward with all his might. In the intense explosion, the tens of thousands of bone spikes were temporarily forced back. The closed shield opened a gap, and the grenade launcher was raised from it and the trigger was pulled. A whistling sound burst forth. It returned without any success in front of the nightmare wings. A notification popped up on Huaishe's phone. Hold fast, emergency deployment of long-range support. Waiting time, 13 seconds. The sound of firing rang out. Without any instructions, the soldiers from the cast iron army indifferently pulled the trigger at the enemy, pushing the shield wall forward step by step. Ridiculous! The old shaman spread his wings and flew nimbly in the air. In an instant, he appeared from behind and raised his palm towards the enemies below. He opened it, and a strange eye quickly formed in his palm and opened. "Send me up." Huaishe stretched out his hand and pressed on Crystal 1-1's shoulder. Then, the soldier overlapped his hands without hesitation and suddenly raised them up, carrying Huaishe's body and flying up. In midair, Huaishe's body rolled and nimbly adjusted his trajectory. He aimed at the old ghost's palm and pulled the trigger, instantly emptying a magazine. The bullet was blocked by an invisible force in front of the old shaman. It exploded repeatedly, causing cracks to appear in the defense in front of him. Huaishe had already risen in front of the old shaman. He threw away the pistol that was no longer useful, and the hammer of pain appeared in his hand. He swept it horizontally and activated the flame jet. It smashed down on his head with all its might. 80. Feeling the strange threat from the hammer of pain, the old shaman did not dare to resist it head-on. He quickly retreated, preparing to slaughter Huaishe at will after his upward momentum was gone. However, he did not expect that the hammer in Huaishe's hand would disappear like an illusion and be replaced by a rope that shot out. He was caught off guard and wrapped around his ankle. Huaishe grinned. He poured in origin form and activated the rope of sorrow. The rope extended wildly and wrapped around his body. It quickly contracted, causing an instant of delay. The burning eyes of the mountain ghost were just inches away. His empty right hand opened, and the sacrificial knife appeared. He held it tightly and stabbed it down, deeply wedged it into the shield in front of him. Then, the drummer. The sound of thunder burst forth, and in a split second, the blade vibrated, destroying the layer of defense as easily as breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, deeply piercing into his face. You didn't expect this, did you, little brother? Chapter 4:11. 5 minutes before 6 o'clock in the evening. In the captain's room, Ai Ching silently leaned on the chair that originally belonged to Rudolph as she stared at the huge screen hanging on the wall. This is a good place. The young man known as Mr. Fan paced around the astonishingly spacious room as he looked around. Behind the slowly unfurling face, countless fine steel fragments appeared and pieced together as the pivot turned, covering the young man's face and forming a strange lens like a night vision device that looked around. Under the illumination of the green light, the wall also became transparent, revealing the complex structure hidden behind. Then, I will prepare to connect. He looked back at Ai Ching. I'll leave the command to you later. Yes, thank you. Ai Ching nodded. Then, Mr. Fan fell on his back. The young man's body had already shattered in midair, and completely illogical mechanical facilities spread out layer by layer from the cracks of the body. Like a swarm of snakes, cables stretched out and slithered on their own, tearing apart the expensive decorations on the floor and walls as they forcibly connected to the control center, combining him and the astral into one. At this moment, a majestic source of origin substance emerged from his soul, carrying his will as it instantly flowed throughout the huge astral. Countless cables, machinery, and equipment, regardless of model, age, or format, were all controlled by Yencher's stigmata. It was impossible to achieve such a miracle with only the divine armament. But long before that, his other body parts had been scattered in various key parts of the astral by the self-proclaimed driver, Martin Edward. With the activation signal from the switchboard, a total of 16 intruding serial machines emitted a furnace of heat, assisting his will as they turned the astral into Yencher's body parts inch by inch. A little limit in the captain's room, the divine armament covered in steel spoke in an old voice. Soon, as the personality simulation module went offline, it became a purely mechanical voice. After countless flashes of static on the screen that took up an entire wall, surveillance cameras of various sizes quickly appeared. Initial coverage of the astral is complete. Region detection commencing. Database installation commencing. Mobile command center deployment complete. Soon, the images from the countless surveillance cameras were quickly corrected, filtered, pieced together, and eliminated. A miniature model of the astral was displayed. All of the secret passages, mechanisms, rooms, and even the electrical circuits, water sources, and air filters were taken over by Yencher, becoming his eyes and ears. He listened, observed, and analyzed. All of the members of the Fine Night Association that had been selected from the database were marked on the map. There were a total of 126 suspects. Finally, the mechanical voice calmly reported, "Selection complete." Ai Ching nodded. "Has the soul probe finished loading? It can be used at any time. Then load it into the origin substance testing team and analyze it against the rotten dream data," Ai Ching said. "Let me take a look at the infection rate on the car." As soon as he said that, a shocking blood-red color spread out from the virtual map, covering almost half of the Stellaris. At least one-third of the passengers had been infected by the astral dream. The Fine Night Association had definitely put in a lot of effort for this operation. They had actually prepared so many seeds of nightmares in advance. Presumably, before they got on the train, there were already thousands of passengers who had been infected without knowing it. Through the explosive infection, the number of infected people had increased by 8 to 9 times overnight. After another night, there would probably be no healthy people left on the train. At this moment, red alerts representing the astral dream's infection were everywhere, leaving behind the early-stage infected people who still had a chance of recovery. The key parts of the train and the departments were almost everywhere in a shocking crimson color. They were the late-stage infected people who had been completely devoured by the astral dream and had become walking corpses. The new personality formed in the astral dream was hidden behind the subjective consciousness. As long as the bell from the sacrifice rang, it could tear apart the last trace of the host's original consciousness and complete the replacement and devour. Ai Ching rubbed her forehead, picked up the phone, and connected to the temporary command center in the rear. "Can the decision-making room send me a red book?" "Don't joke around, Ms. AI." The liaison officer sighed helplessly. At this year's joint meeting, the P5 just limited and cleared the number of documents issued. This year, only one was issued in the Asian region. If you sign it now, the decision-making room will definitely explode. In the present realm and many borders, the Astronomy Association had a lot of great power. Among all these powers, the most eye-catching was the clearance document that could be directly issued as long as it was verified that there was a threat to the present realm. It was a notice of erasing a person from the world. It was a license to kill that was recognized by the whole territory and had legal legitimacy. The moment the seal was applied, the life of the registered person was equivalent to entering a countdown. However, even the clearance document, which represented death, was not treated equally. There were also internal ranks and weight. Although they had awkward and difficult to remember official names, they could also be divided simply and crudely by the envelope containing the document. Black, yellow, red, white. The most common black letter was issued by the inspector after reporting it to the branch. It was issued for individuals who had ascended, and it was sealed in a black document like an obituary. There was no need for a trial and sentencing. It could be directly executed during the operation. The issuance of the yellow page required careful consideration by the branch and reporting to the decision-making room of the Command Bureau to avoid serious consequences. It targeted an entire organization and a huge family. It was just like the densely packed numbers on every page of a phone book. Once it was torn off, everything recorded on it would be erased and disappear from the world. A red-level clearance document was no longer something that could be written on a piece of paper. This kind of thickness was enough to be bound into a book. The impact of a report that needed to be submitted by the sub-ministerial agencies and approved by the central decision-making room and the local P5 at the same time was too great. A city, an entire family, or an entire border. The moment the central decision-making room stamped the document, the fate of destruction was destined. As for the higher-level white papers, they had only been submitted once in the past 100 years, and it had not been approved. Each white paper brought at least 30 correction points to the present realm. If they were not careful, the whole world would be completely changed. Ai Ching naturally did not expect the higher-ups to give her a red book to clean up after her casual remark. She only emphasized the difficulty of the mission once again and left a record in the command center as a form of insurance in advance. Otherwise, who knew what kind of risks and consequences would occur when the Fine Knight Society decided to fight to the death? After she received another batch of backup quotas from the command center, she decisively hung up the phone and picked up the phone on the table that was already connected to the command channel. She said, "Begin the operation." It was 6:00 in the afternoon. Huai Shi and his subordinates pushed open the door, and the corridor under their feet instantly opened to both sides. A transport track rose from the darkness. Then they quickly sank. Like riding an elevator, countless carriages began to move rapidly in the darkness. Sparks flew on the rails as they were pulled by Yencher's power and moved rapidly. In just half a minute, they quietly arrived at the lower level of Stellaris. The second-class area was naturally the place with the largest number of passengers on Stellaris. There were no individual rooms, but a suite shared by 10 people. Although the bedroom and bathroom were separated, the space was still narrow. Through the floorboards above their heads, they could vaguely hear the noise and running from outside the room. But soon, the faint clamor quickly faded away and disappeared. The action area isolation complete. Carriage number J897, 9 passengers, confirmed as Fine Night Society members. Permission to kill issued. Following the message sent by Yenshur, a crisp sound came. The members of the Iron Legion unlocked all the guns in their hands. When Huai-Shur raised his phone and aimed it at the floorboards above his head, he could see the image simulated by Yenshur's server through the floorboard. A few figures gathered together, kneeling and praying. As if chanting some ancient scripture, the fanatical voices overlapped and spread in all directions. It made people drowsy and fell into a rotten dream bit by bit. "Sir, please give the order." Crystal 1-1 asked for instructions. Huai-Shur didn't know how to react. It was his first time as a commander, so he didn't know how to sound professional. While waiting, someone seemed to notice that the sounds outside had disappeared. Realizing that something was wrong, he walked toward the door and then found that the door handle couldn't be turned. He froze for a moment and wanted to turn around and shout, "Do it, do it!" Huai-Shur lowered his voice. He didn't care about professionalism and directly drew his sword to charge. Pooh! There was a soft sound. Half of the person's head exploded into a mass of blood. Then, the soft sound didn't stop. The members of the Iron Legion skillfully pulled the trigger and killed the members of the Fine Night Society on the floorboards. When Huai-Shur reacted, almost everyone on the floorboards was dead. He was stunned for a long time and awkwardly put the sword of virtue back. He deeply felt that the times had changed. The other side was fighting terrorism. It was obviously inappropriate for him to pull out a sword and fight 300 rounds. Target killed. Crystal 1-1 turned around and said, "Stay vigilant. 1-11 is searching." Thus, a silent soldier directly took out a folding ladder from his back and skillfully climbed up. He smashed open the floorboards, went up, and skillfully shot the body of the deceased with a pistol. Finally, he put an iron box on the wall of the room. Then he slid down the ladder and put away the things. He raised his hand and reported to Huai-Shur, "Sir, the cleaning is complete. There are no abnormalities." The dumbfounded Huai-Shur nodded. "Thank you for your hard work. What's next?" His phone vibrated, and the next mission location was marked. The tracks began to move again, taking them to the next location. After walking for a while, Crystal 1-11 took out a remote control and pressed it. A low muffled sound came from the distance. Huai-Shur was dumbfounded. How skillful at destroying corpses! It was really an eye-opener. He was originally prepared to bring people up, but he didn't expect that this was a money-farming team. He really came to be the boss. Just as his imagination was running wild, his phone suddenly vibrated. A warning popped up. Chapter 412. The sacrificial knife cleanly cut through the old shaman's cheekbone. With a roar from Huai-Shur, it suddenly pulled, crushing the old shaman's tongue and piercing out of his mouth. Before the shriveled flesh could even bleed, Huai-Shur pulled out the sword of virtue from the saddlebag on her back while she was in midair. He pressed down on the old shaman's shoulder and stabbed the blade into the old man's neck. It came out from the back of his neck and swung horizontally. Decapitation! A broken and sluggish head flew from his shoulder along with the purplish-black blood. The scattered white hair was dyed red by the blood. But then, the headless corpse suddenly moved. It raised its hand and pressed it against Huai-Shur's face. In the palm, countless tiny eyes opened in an instant, staring at Huai-Shur's eyes with hatred. Brilliance from the abyss gushed out from it. "You worthless bastards, feel the truth." A torrent of origin substance gushed out from his palm like a tsunami, pouring into Huai-Shur's body along with a sea of nightmares. Huai-Shur's vision turned black. He immediately felt as if his soul had left his body. It was actually being pushed back by the old ghost. Behind him, a black vortex appeared out of thin air. Countless deformed limbs stretched out from it, pulling Huai Shi's soul, wanting to pull him into the deepest part of the rotten dream. Witness the truth. The broken head grinned, accompanied by countless illusions that could only be seen in nightmares, appearing in front of Huai Shi. The essence of the abyss and the philosophy of the rotten dream continuously emerged from Huai Shi's consciousness, constantly wearing down his will to resist, wanting to deeply take root in his soul. He wanted to turn him into a fallen one of the rotten dream. Receive the gift of the Great Spirit, the lucky one chosen by the good knight. The old face smiled sinisterly. Bid farewell to the decaying world. From now on, you will be my companion, a sober person in this sad world. In a trance, Huai Shi felt as if he was swallowed by endless darkness. The world fell apart in front of him, and everything shattered into illusions like a dream. Reality and illusion were reversed, and endless dreams of madness engulfed him. It was just a moment, but it was more than thousands of years. In the prison of endless darkness, the brilliance in Huai Shi's eyes gradually extinguished. In the end, only darkness was left. In the endless darkness, only a warm and kind light waited in front of him. Come, come. The old shaman smiled and spread his hands in the light. Embrace the only truth in this world, accept the supreme redemption from the good knight. Before that, let me ask you a question. Deep in her sleepiness and absent-mindedness, Huai Shi subconsciously asked, "Does your company provide overtime pay?" The old shaman was stunned. "There should be paid leave, right?" Huai Shi asked again. 5 insurances and 1 housing fund? Year-end bonus? Does your company have an exclusive passage? VIP lounge? First-class reimbursements? Dissatisfaction appeared in his empty eyes. Huai Shi asked, "I'm still an artist, so there should be a signing fee, right? What about exposure? Are there any preparations to increase popularity? The trending headlines should be bought for at least a few months, right? There's nothing?" He frowned and woke up from the nightmare. He opened his eyes and looked at the hideous wreckage in front of him. "Then you have the nerve to come out and swindle money?" Boom! The hammer of pain was raised, aimed at the old shaman's newly grown face, and smashed down. Blood splattered. Amidst the screams, the palm that grabbed Huai Shi burst forth with endless power and threw Huai Shi out. He flew like a cannonball and smashed into countless squirming flesh. Stubborn. The old shaman raised his hand again and slowly grasped at Huai Shi. But then, his hand was smashed. In the self-activated shield array, Crystal 1-1 and Crystal 1-2 had already walked out with their shield. They held a pistol in their hands and moved forward step by step, taking turns to cover. The bullets fired from the pistol were extremely strange. Every bullet that hit the old shaman would explode a bloody hole in his body. The wound couldn't be healed and was sizzling. When he was changing the magazine, he could see the red bullets carved from crystals. Their movements were swift. Under the alternating shooting and cover, they immediately arrived in front of Huai Shi. Crystal Lattice 1-1 took out a mountain-splitting axe and cleanly cut off the flesh that was entangling Huai Shi. He pulled him up, ignoring the flesh tentacles that were clinging to his arm, and quickly ran away. Soon, Huai Shi was dragged back behind the bunker. He turned around and shouted, "Heart-strengthening injection, now!" No need, he's still alive." Huai Shi coughed and got up from the ground. He casually tore off the tentacles entangling his body and threw them on the ground. In the rain of bullets, the old shaman was already riddled with holes. However, tentacles of flesh and blood continued to extend from his wounds. They wriggled and formed deformed limbs and organs. His original human figure could not be seen at all. The long-range attack in position. Yenshir's mechanical voice sounded in the channel. "Prepare for impact." A roar burst out, the ceiling cracked, and a pungent smell instantly spread out. A torrent swept across. Water poured in from the ceiling like a waterfall, making Huai Shi look up in shock. The corner of his eyes twitched. It was all alchemy fuel. Once it was ignited, it would be enough to send them to the sky. This was the rhythm of a heroic sacrifice. Following the roar, behind the gap in the wall, far away, the artillery module quickly descended on the rail. But this time, there was a figure beside the cannon. Andrea. The scholar from the ivory tower put his hand on the cannon next to him. He raised his finger and gestured a pistol in the air. An invisible trigger was pulled. "Byung," she whispered softly. The next moment, a spark burst out from the alchemy fuel out of thin air and instantly turned into a mournful frenzy. In the dazzling fire, the endless flow of flames was restrained by an invisible force. All the alchemy fuel evaporated in an instant and turned into a part of the terrifying temperature. All the heat was violently stimulated and tightly bound in that narrow space. It formed a blurry figure. It was as if the god of the flames had descended. Under the control of thermodynamics and salamander, Andrea straightforwardly expressed this destructive power clearly. As the flames swept across the area, nothing was left behind. Whether it was the old man who kept regenerating, the corroded flesh on the wall, or even the insignificant things in the hall, they were all buried in the sea of fire. In the end, as the flames shrank, only the tower, emblem of the ivory tower, was left. It burned fiercely, proving that everything had just happened. Huaishur took a deep breath and turned around to wave at Andrea to thank her. Andrea also winked at him. As the artillery module rose into the air again, it went to other places. Until the old man's bones disappeared, Crystal 1-1 staggered back 2 steps and sat on the ground. He raised his hand weakly and signaled for help. Huaishur immediately took out the sacrificial knife and cut open Crystal 1-1's broken gloves and cuffs. The tentacles of flesh had already torn his armor and sank into his arm. Crystal 1-1 was ruthless and was about to cut off his arm, but Huaishur grabbed his hand that was holding the knife. "Wait!" He took out the blood bottle that he had prepared in advance from his pocket, tore off the cap, and poured the venomous blood on Crystal's arm. With a sizzling sound, Crystal 1-1 suppressed a cry of pain. Soon, the tentacles of flesh had disappeared, and mold-like erosion marks appeared on the incomplete flesh, deep enough to see bone. The effect of fighting poison with poison was outstanding, but emergency treatment could only be done to this extent. Huaishur roughly stroked his arm, pulled out the poison, and left the rest to the medics. After spraying a layer of spray, a mechanical splint was immediately installed on his arm, and the injury could no longer be seen. Crystal 1-1 saluted Huaishur, got up, and motioned for his subordinates to clean up the mess, and then prepared to set off again. Without giving them any chance to catch their breath, a new mission was assigned from Yenshur. The group of lunatics from the Fine Knight Society finally realized that something was wrong and began to riot and resist, but the general trend was gone. They had long been separated into different places, waiting for the Legion to annihilate them. There were many missions, but Huaishur wasn't on this mission. Soon, Tony's angry voice sounded in the earpiece. A5, I screwed up, Fu*K. One of them ran away. Damn it, this time I failed miserably. I'll be there immediately. Huaishur replied, picked up his sword from the ground, waved goodbye, and was about to leave when Crystal 1-1 stopped him. He picked up Huaishur's pistol from the ground, then took out his magazine, filled it with several red crystal bullets, and handed it to Huaishur. Blessed bullets can effectively kill hell creatures. He saluted Huaishur and said goodbye. Have a safe trip, sir. Ah, okay. Huaishur stuffed the gun into his saddlebag, waved at them, turned around, grabbed the hanging steel rope, and quickly climbed up. In midair, he pressed the earpiece. This is Huaishur, what's going on? A priest ran away, Tony panted. While running, Tony panted as he reported, I was 1 step too late. That guy has already run out of the cordon and into a public area. Is the sniper in position? F***CK. There was a loud roar from the other end of the earpiece, and the faint roar of eternal night. Then there was the sound of an explosion. Intensive gunshots rang out, and the earpiece was cut off. As the rope rose, Huai Shi also heard the gunshots gradually approaching. He gripped the sword of virtue tightly and was ready to rush out the moment the deck flipped up. Then he saw a small square in a mess. Many tourists were already dead on the street, and several walking corpses of the fine night society were shooting wildly with guns, causing chaos. There were also a few passengers who had already been held hostage. From the exit of the underground passage, a half-broken figure slowly walked out. Chapter 4:13. That person was wearing a charred purple robe, and his entire face was dyed red with blood. He held a strange longsword in his hand. He seemed to be seriously injured as he staggered forward. When he saw the iron-cast army rushing over, he revealed a sinister smile. "Get lost!" He raised the longsword in his hand and slashed down. The power from the rotten dream instantly enveloped the entire square. Dozens of flesh tentacles grew out from the blade and swept across. After forcing the iron-cast army to retreat, they pulled a few passengers who couldn't escape in time. Those victims were pulled into the illusory blade. Their voices could no longer be heard, only the sound of chewing could be heard. Then, he casually pulled a hostage from the hands of the believers and placed the wriggling blade on that person's neck. "Get out of my way!" He stared with his scarlet eyes and sharp canine teeth. "Whoever takes another step forward will die." Unfortunately, his strategy was used in the wrong place. The Astronomy Association never negotiated with this group of lunatics, especially the iron-cast army. Without orders from above, even if they were holding Commander Ai Ching hostage, this group of war machines would never hesitate. The purple-clothed priest's expression twitched. The blade in his hand was about to slash down again. At this time, Huai Shi finally stepped forward. "Wait. Calm down. Calm down." He walked out and shouted, "I'm a negotiator. You can talk to me if you have anything to say." He was a ghost negotiator. He even had to check his phone before he could write the judgment for the negotiation. But he had to talk now. Who asked that unlucky person to be so familiar with him? Thinking of this, Huai Shi couldn't help but sigh. He glared at the pale hostage with a runny nose. "Yuan Zhao. Why is it you again? Why are you a rank 2 sublimator? Do you have to be so embarrassing?" Yuan Zhao also looked at him with a dumbfounded expression. He glared back, meaning, "I just came out to buy cold medicine. I don't know what happened." He had just walked out of the pharmacy when he was held hostage by more than 10 lunatics with guns and cannons. He didn't know where to start. He didn't know what had happened. The two of them exchanged glances, and then realized that neither of them could understand what the other was saying. It was like a chicken trying to talk to a duck. "Negotiator." The priest in purple frowned and asked suspiciously, "Is there such a position in the Astronomy Association?" "Of course there is. You haven't heard of it because you're ignorant, okay?" Huai Shi's voice shook as he said, "I'm super good at negotiating. Just now, I even made an old man cry because he didn't want to pay after his sword was finished." "Oh right, is he one of your people?" He stepped forward and heard the purple-robed priest's angry shout, "Stop! Don't move!" He stood there awkwardly. The blade was raised an inch, and the sticky flesh tentacles were already licking Yuan Zhao's neck. Yuan Zhao's expression was terrified. He glared fiercely at Huai Shi, hinting him not to act recklessly. How was this bastard a negotiation expert? He was simply an evil spirit that had come to take his life. It was more like he was an expert. What kind of negotiation was this? At this time, the purple-robed priest had already made his decision. Although he didn't believe Huai Shi's nonsense of being a negotiation expert, seeing the army stop when he came out, it seemed like he had a lot of status. "You, throw away your weapon!" He raised his sword and said coldly. Huai Shi raised his hand and threw the sword of virtue behind him. He turned around and asked, and then, "Raise your hand and put it where I can see it." He said cautiously, "Walk this way. Slow down a bit, otherwise this little bastard is dead. Do you understand?" He tightened his grip on the sword, and Yuan Zhao's neck was about to be cut open. What was even more disgusting was that the flesh tentacles were still crawling on his face and scratching his nose. He trembled and couldn't help but want to sneeze. It was too itchy. "Good, good, good, is this correct?" Huaishe put on her standard businesslike smile, raised her hands high, slowed down her pace, and walked forward step by step. He secretly calculated the distance between them. 15 meters. It was still too far. If there was a slight problem, Yuan Zhao would lose his neck. The Yuan family might even give him a new head. He stepped forward step by step. There were still 5 steps left. He took a deep breath and took another step forward. The floor under his feet slightly whined. Yu's steps was charging, causing the muscles under his trousers to tighten and blue veins to appear. 2 more steps. Then, he saw Yuan Zhao take a deep breath. He couldn't help but raise his head and sneeze loudly. Snot bubbles flew out. In the silence, a strange sound suddenly came from his chest. The purple-robed priest's expression suddenly changed. He didn't hesitate to hold his sword tightly. Huaishe was even faster than him. His raised hands swung down and the axe of wrath flew out. At the same time, the floor under Huaishe's feet suddenly shattered. His body shot forward without warning. Accelerate! But he was still 1 step too slow. Right in front of him, the purple-robed priest's face was ferocious. His body was rapidly expanding, as if something was rapidly growing in his body. The rotten dream from the abyss was about to take shape and break out of its shell. "Let's die together." He laughed shrilly, but his laughter stopped abruptly. There was a burst of thunder. It was like a predator suddenly leaping out of the shadows, letting out a roar that shocked everyone's soul. Everyone's consciousness froze for a short moment. A sharp beam of light descended from the sky. It was like lightning bursting out of the thunder. A fleeting shadow appeared behind the purple-robed priest without warning. It raised an exaggerated and majestic broadsword and slashed down. Iron light rose from the sword's spine, faintly intertwining into a pure white tiger. It looked down indifferently at everything in the world. Its eyes were blood-red. It gnashed its teeth and sucked blood. Its stomach was rumbling with hunger. Stared at by the pair of empty eyes, the purple-robed priest's movements were completely frozen. Even the changes in his body came to an abrupt halt. He was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Stigmata relic, Mountain Lord. In the blink of an eye, the Mountain Lord's broadsword slashed through. The stigmata of tyranny in the blade was activated. It easily pierced through the purple-robed priest's nightmare and body. It cut through and devoured everything. Dazzling scarlet splashed out and fell on the girl's sword-wielding hands. Yuan. Amidst the gunshots of the iron-cast army, she reached out and pulled Yuan Zhao up from the ground. She lowered her head and looked at him. "Didn't you say you came out to buy cold medicine?" She frowned and asked, "Why did you come here?" "It's a long story." Yuan Zhao reflexively stuffed an origin substance model deeper into his chest. During the fight, the model's box was broken, revealing the scantily clad girl inside. "So you used the excuse of having a cold to not go out. Did you come to this kind of place?" Yuan's eyes immediately became disdainful. "Think about how to explain it to Aunt." "Don't." Yuan Zhao was shocked. He didn't even have time to wipe his snot. He wanted to hug Yuan's leg. "Big sister, spare me this time, just this time." He didn't manage to hug her leg. However, he was stopped by a broadsword. Yuan picked up this embarrassing thing and tossed it to the side. The broadsword in her hand quickly shrank until it turned into a bracelet and returned to her wrist. "I've troubled you again, Mr. Huaishe." The girl in the gray dress bowed, her expression becoming dignified and solemn. She lowered her head and thanked the dazed Huai Shi. It's all thanks to you. Otherwise, this disappointing Yuan Zhao would have been in trouble again. Ah, it's nothing. I just acted courageously for a just cause. Huai Shi finally reacted. He hurriedly waved his hand and looked curiously at the pitiful youth not far away. Is he really okay? Yuan Zhao opened his mouth to speak, but Yuan immediately interrupted him. He's fine. The girl glanced at her cousin and said, It's just a small cold. Thank you for your concern. You're running out to buy such shameless things with a fever. I'll report it to aunt and uncle in detail later. Yuan, don't go too far. As if he had seen the end of the world, Yuan Zhao's eyes widened in grief and indignation. If we're going to die, we're going to die together. Be careful, or I'll tell Huai Shi. Smack. Yuan's hand was as fast as lightning. Yuan Zhao's eyes rolled back and he fell to the ground before he could finish his words. Beside him, Huai Shi was dumbfounded. Did he just mention me? No. Yuan turned around with a serious expression. He caught a cold and was confused by the fever. But he said he was going to tell me. No. Yuan emphasized again, her expression unprecedentedly serious. He caught a cold and fainted. Under the girl's stern gaze, Huai Shi wisely chose to give up on this issue. It was only right for a cousin to beat up a cousin. What did it have to do with Huai Shi? Then, the girl picked up her unconscious cousin and politely said goodbye. After a simple examination and verification, they turned and left. Huai Shi was left standing alone in the same place, at a loss. Soon, when he was examining the body of the purple-clothed priest, he saw a phone on the ground. The camera was still on and the screen was not locked. When he picked it up, he accidentally touched the shutter and a familiar sound was heard. Huai Shi froze for a moment and frowned. Do you want to send the photo? The software popped up a notification. Huai Shi chose no and exited the photo mode, revealing that the chat group was already filled with photos. Every photo was of a face that she was incomparably familiar with. Huai Shi was stunned. What kind of group is this? Why are all the photos in this group of myself? And there were captions next to the photos. His Royal Highness seems to be lost, His Royal Highness smiling, His Royal Highness's back. His Royal Highness eating breakfast, asterisk, super cute, I want to rub my face. His Royal Highness shopping, His Royal Highness smoking, the woman next to him is so annoying. In the middle, there were a bunch of group members shouting excitedly, Take more photos, take more photos. Oh, as expected of the Vice President, so awesome. Majimoto. I'm so hungry and thirsty. Type with both hands to show my innocence. I'm almost done, is there anything else? Huai Shi's hand trembled, then trembled again, and the corner of his eyes twitched. When he opened the group information with trembling hands, he saw the title Paradise Prince Fan Club, and suddenly his vision went dark. In the short period of being stunned, footsteps suddenly sounded from a distance. In such a hurry, Yuan panted slightly as if she had sprinted over. Her dignified and serious face revealed a rare hint of panic. She looked around nervously and asked, Mr. Huai Shi, may I ask if you've seen my mobile phone? Before she finished, she saw Huai Shi's dumbfounded face. And the thing he picked up, the screen of the phone was still lit. Countless messages from the group members flashed, one after another. She was stiff in the same place. You are the Vice President? In the dead silence, Huai Shi stared at the girl in front of him. It suddenly dawned on him. In an instant, all the questions ushered in the only answer. Huai Shi suddenly understood, but he couldn't believe it. You saw it. Yuan lowered her head. She had a dignified and solemn expression, but it made people feel extra scared. She stared at Huai Shi's face and asked softly, You saw it, right? Huai Shi's expression twitched wildly, and he felt the premonition of death suddenly beating wildly, and then quickly disappearing without a trace. In the silence, the girl's eyes gradually became red. Chapter 4:14. Why Sure was still in a daze. Then he found that he seemed to have accidentally made Yuan cry? That's not right. I treat you as a friend, but you covet my body. Shouldn't I be the one crying at this time? Why Sure coughed awkwardly. That I didn't. Yuan suddenly said. No, I mean, I didn't. Yuan raised her voice. Her eyes were red and she was not dignified. She was like a child who had been annoyed at a loss. Okay, I know. Why Sure suddenly interrupted her. He got up and took a step forward. He raised his hand to stop her from continuing and apologized solemnly. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Anyway, I'm sorry. He handed the phone to Yuan. I don't know what happened, but I suddenly found a mobile phone. Although it's not yours, I have to go to work later. Can you help me return it to the owner? He said, no matter how I look at it, it seems to be very expensive, right? Yuan hesitated and did not take it. She was a little hesitant. Why Sure asked softly, just do me a favor, okay? Okay. I said okay. Yuan finally took the phone. She raised her wrist and rubbed her red eyes. She tried to keep a straight face, but she did not dare to look at Why Sure. Her eyes wandered. Well, I have to go. It's not safe for you to be alone. Go back quickly. Why Sure took 2 steps back and said goodbye softly. After taking 2 steps, he seemed to think of something and strode back. Standing in front of Yuan, the girl in the gray skirt was covered by his shadow. She shrunk her shoulders subconsciously. She heard Why Sure's voice. By the way, please help me remind the owner. Don't do this next time. He said calmly. If you want to take a picture, just tell me. After that, Why Sure took a few steps back and waved at her. He turned and left. Only Yuan was left standing in the same place, looking down at her mobile phone. After a long time, she looked up at the direction Why Sure left. He sniffed hard. Only at this moment did she look like a 16-year-old girl. There were heroes in this world. On her 16th birthday, she had suddenly discovered this, though she had never entertained any hope of such a fact. However, everything that she had seen on the television in the ward that day had been deeply imprinted into her memory along with the impact of a violent storm. She seemed to be different from before. From a very young age, she was the kind of child that all parents hoped for. They wouldn't cry, quarrel, or make a fuss. They wouldn't clamor to see Santa Claus or cartoons, and they would scoff at all the childish things that only existed in storybooks. Like a little adult, her mother always smiled and pinched her face. But there was nothing wrong with being like an adult. At least, it was better than being a troublesome cousin who was always crying and making trouble. That kind of attitude of looking down on the world because of his youth was too childish. Other than family, there wouldn't always be someone to clean up the mess for you. All this time, she had been trying to face all this with a serious and dignified attitude, abandoning those immature weaknesses and beautiful dreams, and trying hard to face this overly large and indifferent world. Until then, it should have been like this. But suddenly, one day, she found that this world was different from what she had imagined. It was like seeing a flame in the distance from a long night. There were heroes in this world, and he held the flame high and walked in front. There was no fear, no fear. Just like in the story, he walked in the darkness with a smile. Although there were some differences, it still made people yearn for it, and it still shone brightly. For the first time in her life, she actually felt a little jealous of her cousin. Why would someone challenge those enemies for such a childish person? Why could he become friends with such a person so easily? Why was the person being protected, not her? When she came back to her senses, there was a limited edition silver card in her hand. When she began to try to trace everything left by that figure, she seemed to have become the vice president of a strange fan club. For the first time, she felt that it was good to be rich. Even if she spent all her pocket money, her parents wouldn't suspect her. It was really good to have a dignified character. In addition, there were too many firsts because of this. Even if it was just foolishly cheering for strangers on the internet, it could also make people happy. Even if she chased after someone's back with the expectation of not getting a response, it didn't matter if she became the kind of person she used to look down on. This was the little secret that belonged to Yuan. A secret hidden in her heart that would never be spoken out. It should have been like this. She lowered her head and looked at the concern messages on her phone because she hadn't spoken for a long time. She couldn't help but rub her nose. Hesitating, her fingers pressed on the screen. I've been discovered, QEQ. Is the enemy so difficult to deal with? Tony, who was walking towards him, asked curiously, Why do you look so bleak? No, it's just, I was scared. Huaishur scratched his head awkwardly and was silent for a long time. He shrugged and said, I just suddenly realized that maybe I'm more popular than I thought, you know? Wow, you're too much, aren't you? Tony shook his head and said, with a cowherd face, You're saying things that will hurt us single dogs. I don't have a girlfriend either, okay. You just want to play for a while and don't want to confirm your relationship, right? Tony's eyes were full of disdain. I've seen a lot of scumbags like you. Last time, there was one in the Dark Army who was like you and almost went bald. You'd better be careful. I'm only 17. Even if I lose my hair, I'll have to wait until I'm the same age as you. Huaishur rolled his eyes. Besides, how can you call it scumbag when it comes to idols? I'm just worried about how to face my female fans. Heh, I knew it. Tony shook his head in disdain. Bastard, what do you know? Huaishur was stunned for a long time. How did you know? Tony asked. How do you know I don't know? Okay, ban the dolls. Ban the dolls. That's enough. Huaishur interrupted him. He couldn't even talk about serious things with this guy. He decisively changed the topic. Have you solved the problem on your side? Most of them don't need us to do anything. The Iron Legion took care of them directly. But the next one is a little more difficult. Tony scratched his head and led the way in front. The two of them took the internal express train prepared by Yenshur and were quickly taken to the depths of the train. Generally speaking, the mission is difficult because the support from above is not enough. You have to rely on yourself. Secondly, the mission requirements are too strange. You have to do things with your hands tied. This time, there are no extra requirements. It's as difficult as an outing, he said. Although it's smooth sailing, there's still a problem. Until now, the priest of the Fine Knight Society hasn't shown himself. There's information that he quietly boarded the train at the border of the Grey Coast. But we searched the entire train and couldn't find him at all. I'm afraid he decided to use remote control from the beginning. He hid in that corner and didn't want to meet his cannon fodder at all. Originally, in order to deal with him, I specially applied for a numbered spell bomb, but I haven't met him yet. I'm afraid he's hiding and wants to do something. While complaining, his hands didn't stop moving. He directly sent the detailed information and photos to Huaishur through his mobile phone. You also have to be careful. If you meet him, quickly run and call for help. If you can't call for help or run away, then it'll be bad. In the photo was a strange middle-aged man. The first impression he gave was that he was thin, as if he was malnourished. His eyes were protruding, and there were two thick black circles under his eyes that only the mighty people in the tribulation stage had. Furthermore, those two dark green eyes were extremely frightening. There was a strange shadow in them, and one could feel a chill even though they were separated by a photo. Mirando M. Landau, one of the priests of the Fine Knight Society. It is said that he was once blessed by a large group leader and was given the rank of bestower not long ago, and he himself is an ascendant who voluntarily entered the abyss. It has been confirmed that he is a fourth-order stigmata of the American lineage, the slender ghost shadow. He can teleport in dark places at will. According to the information, he has the ability to clone. More importantly, he has a stigmata relic in his hands. After combining with his own stigmata, he can form the divine mark Dracula. None of these were things that Huai Shi could defeat. Forget about the priest of the Fine Knight Society. He couldn't deal with the fourth order stigmata, the rank of the bestower, and the divine mark. Even if he worked hard now and could cut down a third order, it would be useless if he encountered a fourth order. Not to mention other things, even if it was a copycat angel, it would be a piece of cake to kill a company like him. And the bestower was the rank of the group leader, which was an out-and-out high level. The bestower, the wearer, the crown wearer, and the ruler above. This was the division of the walking disasters in the eternal abyss. All hell creatures with self-consciousness would be given a unique name from a certain destructive element, regardless of whether they were strong or weak. After being given a name, they would be pulled out from the countless monsters and have self-consciousness and pursuit. Unique. And the wearer knew honor and shame, and was no longer limited by their nature of ignorance and ugliness. After getting rid of the defects and limitations of the past, they advanced into a new form and began to seek a higher source of wisdom and power. And the crown wearer was one level higher. After being recognized by the ruler as his own kin, he knew etiquette, order, and hierarchy and became the emissary of the abyss, and was given the honor and status of commanding the same kind. Finally, the ruler set the rules and controlled the endless abyss under his command. He was the supreme in hell. The four were like the castes in India, forming the chaotic order in the abyss. Huai Shi was just a second order. No matter how many cheats he had, he was just a newbie. How could he fight with them? What's more, there was the divine mark in his hand. Huai Shi didn't dare to be stubborn and directly gave up. So, it was still right to call someone. If he had to rely on himself, he didn't know how long it would take. In addition, there was now a problem that they needed to solve. Now on the Stellaris, the last remnants of the Fine Knight Society. Chapter 4:15. Following the Astronomy Association's sudden cleanup operation, the Iron Foundry Legion swept through the entire Stellaris and cleaned up the place. Most of the Rotten Dream believers were killed in the first round of attacks. Including more than 300 high-level believers, 16 priests were all killed. There were some who put up a resistance, but under the attack of the cannons and the ascendants, it didn't take long for them to be wiped out. Now there were only a few dozen people left. Under the leadership of 7 or 8 priests, they were holed up in a corner and stubbornly resisting. If you encounter something you can't solve, can't you just fire a shot? Huai Shi still wanted to admire the support of the cannons. Fire at the engine room? Tony was shocked by Huai Shi's death-seeking creativity. Are you really a little genius? Where? Huai Shi seemed to have heard a name that he was particularly interested in. His eyes lit up. Engine room? Yes. That's great. Cough cough. It takes too much effort. Huai Shi almost let it slip. He couldn't help but rub his hands in excitement. Wasn't this why he had called for the Astronomy Association's support? It was finally about to begin. They passed through the opened hatch and through the layers of open doors. They arrived outside the heavily guarded blockade. Inside the layers of the iron-cast army's formation, the engine room was completely surrounded. In the innermost layer, the thick and heavy door had been completely distorted. There was a large hole in it, and the edges were dyed scarlet with blood. Several incomplete corpses could be vaguely seen in the corridor inside. The door of the engine room was covered in blood and squirming flesh. It was like the organs of a monster, and several hideous eyes were constantly shaking. They faced each other in silence. It was obvious that the two had been waiting for a long time. The black-bearded Amazon behind the formation waved at them. Why did you come down? Tony was shocked. Aren't you a bodyguard in the captain's room? As the saying went, all tactics were changed. Especially when the situation was against the wind, everyone liked to do this once or twice. As long as they succeeded once, they could instantly turn the situation around and maximize the effect of the program. It was simply an art. It could be said that the Iron Foundry Legion on the Stellaris had been mobilized in full force. The weakest one was the command center on the train, where AI Ching was in the conductor's room. As a guard, Amazon was the last line of defense. If he dared to leave his post without permission, even if nothing happened, he would be punished. Moreover, if he offended such a narrow-minded woman like AI Ching, he would probably be tortured to death in the future. I've been ordered to deliver the goods. Amazon shrugged and raised her hand, revealing the small box in her hand. She told me to bring this to you. She said that it's time for you to shine. He handed the box to Huaishur. What was this? After opening it, there was only a key ring inside, and there seemed to be a tooth hanging from it. It had sharp edges like a wolf or something else. It was only the size of a thumb. Huaishur picked it up and sniffed it. He felt that there were traces of alchemy inside, but he could not tell how it was used. She said that you should just take it with you. It will come in handy eventually. Okay. Huaishur hung it on the saddle and looked sideways at the door of the engine room behind the crack in the gate. The deformed eyeball was still slowly turning. Every time it opened and closed, it would split or merge. The pupil was constantly changing. Looking at it for a long time would make one dizzy and sleepy. The soul lens sent over the latest result. Through the wall, Howrin could see layers of tight defenses. The entire interior had been deepened, forming a hell of decaying dreams, which was constantly eroding the Stellaris. Obviously, those guys were planning to take advantage of the terrain and fight to the death with the Astronomy Society. However, considering the equipment in the engine room, the Astronomy Society could not use any heavy firepower. Otherwise, it would be fine if the ship was stranded, but if it sank on the endless sea, it would be over. Even if the person with the agreement could use the abyssal ocean current to travel freely, other things involved in it would all flow into the abyssal hell and belong to the ruler. Leviathan would definitely accept this gift and would not spit it out for the sake of the Astronomy Society. That's a little tricky. Tony scratched his hoarse face. Just a bunch of clowns who think they've succeeded. What's so hard about it? Following the old voice, the ceiling slowly cracked open, and Yenshur, shrouded in steel and countless cables, slowly descended. The young man's face was covered by a huge eyepiece, but his lips were slowly opening and closing, once again letting out his own voice. "Oh, old man, you can talk now? I've temporarily diverted some of my energy." Mr. Fan ordered calmly, "Prepare to attack in 3 minutes. Since you're here, why don't you lend us a hand?" Tony and Huaishur prepared to warm up. "Me too?" Huaishur asked. Mr. Fan nodded and turned his head slightly. "I heard you've received the true teachings of the King of Ghost Beasts." "Who?" Huaishur was confused for a long time before he finally understood. You mean the Orchard Gym? I dare not say I've received the true teachings, but does my singing of Youngman count? In some ways, this is even rarer than receiving the true teachings." Mr. Fan smiled slightly. The countless lenses on his eyepiece focused on Huaishur's eyes. He focused on his face and asked seriously, "How fast can you be?" "If I can prepare in advance and get into position," Huaishur muttered to himself for a moment, then received an answer. "Half as fast as Teacher Luo." "Very good. Then there's no need to use any other methods," Mr. Fan said. "In 2 minutes, I will provide you with origin substances to suppress them. Go in and kill everyone inside. Aiden will cooperate with you and Tony." It was as if they were discussing going out to buy groceries. Just like that, it was decided so easily. Hearing this, Tony could not help but sigh and spread out his arms. Naturally, his subordinates came forward to help him take off the armor on his body. Even the gun and magazine were removed, leaving only 2 strange military knives with hollowed out in the middle of their bodies. Huaishur didn't say anything else. He just quietly stared at the entrance to the engine room through the large shield of the Iron Legion. Through the layers of thick iron doors and deep barriers, He could feel the resonance from the Book of Destiny become clearer. There, something was waiting for him. It had been impatient for a long time. One more minute, Mr. Fan suddenly reminded. The countless eyepieces on his face contracted and expanded, constantly observing everything in the engine room. With a light flick of his finger, a few spots of light landed on the corneas of Huai Shi and the others. Then, Huai Shi's vision seemed to penetrate the wall and peeked into the huge engine room. The engine room, which was as large as a factory, seemed to have become the body of a monster. Everywhere was a thermal image formed by pieces of flesh. Between the 6 sets of engines, a few specially marked figures could be seen anxiously walking around, as if they were arguing with each other. There were even more people holding weapons and standing guard at the door, ready for battle. All the other believers were prostrating on the ground, as if they were worshipping something fervently, raising their heads and chanting. A total of 41 people. 15 seconds, Mr. Fan reminded. Huai Shi took a deep breath and began to miss her own molten iron breath. After getting used to being a dog, he began to feel uncomfortable being a human. There were no sharp teeth, no hard scales, no heavy body, and no slender tail. Fortunately, there were techniques to make up for all of these. Huai Shi pulled out the sword of virtue, thought for a moment, and dispelled the axe of wrath, switching to the sacrificial knife. The impact of the origin substance on this thing, who knew if it was still human or not, was still more effective. The sacrificial knife's ability to absorb blood was better and more convenient. Moreover, if necessary, he could freely adjust the sacrificial knife's weight, speed, and impact. The sword of virtue had begun to faintly hum. It felt the presence of evil. 5-4. The final countdown was about to begin. Huai Shi bent slightly, the muscles of his calves twitching and contracting slowly, like a spring that was being compressed. Step was ready. But his skin began to faintly redden, because hot blood flowed through his veins and surged violently. It was like a hydraulic valve, endlessly injecting more power into his muscles. Amazon seemed to have sensed something, and turned to look at him in astonishment, unable to hide his admiration and shock. With the help of the mirror of nihility, he entered a state that he hadn't entered in a long time. The flames of the mountain ghost's eyes burned. 3-2. At that moment, Mr. Fan's eyes drooped, and he softly murmured, 1. The sound of hummingbirds chirping rang out. Deathly silence abruptly descended, because all sound was instantly restrained. The formless sound formed a tangible sharp object in the air. Just outside the engine room, all the cabin plates suddenly shook and flipped open, revealing the huge machinery that was ready to go behind them. A terrifying sonic boom suddenly swept out, accompanied by the impact of dozens of iron pillars, and poured into the sealed engine room. What followed was a crisscross of intense light. The terrifyingly high heat converged into beams of dazzling lasers. After passing through the layers of lenses, the lasers pierced through a great distance, easily burning through the steel, penetrating the internal space, and casually coming out from the other side. After piercing through the insignificant things, the lasers slowly dissipated. 16 blazing lasers violently stirred, slashing horizontally and vertically, but the scale was so precise that it was impossible to see with the naked eye. Even if it was slashed thousands of times in an instant, it didn't damage any of the key engines or machinery. It was like a sharp dissector. He deftly removed the hard outer shell that was covered with thorns, and the soft and smelly flesh of the fruit was revealed. As for Huai Shi, she had already disappeared from where she stood. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.